All right. Let's see how we did. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, I look different this week. Let's see. That was a fart. Looks like working okay. Just wait
maybe
for
we might stay on Bonar Street.
Bonar Street. I wonder what happens there. All right. Seems like we're good to go. Oh, I'm going to open up my questions here so I know what to talk about. 11/6/2018. Yep. Okay, got that open. Good to go. Yeah, now we wait for Dr. Mike. Oh, hello. As a substitute, we can have Dr. Lowe, who has much insight. Okay. Oh, we got 2 viewers. All right. Excuse me. Let's do this. That's looking pretty good. Got my phone here just in case Mike texts me. Got Piccolo. Let me see that goop. I know. Let me see. Goopy kitty. Piccolo, Piccolo, Piccolo. Oh, excuse me. All right, so we're just waiting for Dr. Mike here. Once he logs on, we will get started. For now, you're stuck with me, which isn't so bad. I don't have much to say until Mike comes on. No, I don't want Microsoft Edge on my phone. I don't ever want to use Edge again. we're just giving Dr. Mike a minute here to log on. Nothing fancy. So just hold tight for the moment. Sent him an invite, so he should be logging on any second here. In the meantime, Dr. Lowe and I are just hanging out. Right, Lo? Okay, questions are good. Just texted me just a second ago, so he should be on here any second now. Hey, Mike.
Hey, JMO.
What's going on, buddy?
Oh, lots of stuff. We're live, yeah?
We are live.
Okay. You are looking so handsome. My handsome boy.
So baby-faced.
You
That was-
baby for your lady's sake.
She was disappointed with how young I look.
Or appointed.
No, I think she wants like a dirty old garbage-faced man. Fortunately, she's stuck with me.
Yeah, it's true. Well, shall we?
Yeah, real quick, just some housekeeping. A couple of you guys messaged me online saying that for whatever reason the live stream comments are not working. So I had our IT guys look into it.
Makes sense.
And they tried something. Let me know if it works. So if you are not able to post questions tonight, let me know. Otherwise, I will assume that it is fine. If it's not fine, just let us know, and I will have them look into it again. So thanks for letting me know previously, and hopefully this did the trick. And if not, keep me posted.
All right, makes sense.
I was wondering why we hadn't had any live stream questions for a while.
Yeah, that looked a little suspicious.
Yeah, I think whatever software they use, like updated and maybe reset a few things here or there.
I gotcha. All right, shall we get into it?
Yeah, let's go.
Kyle Perdomo says, Kyle here, what are the recovery considerations that shift workers face? I work 24 hours at a time in a firehouse, sometimes 34 hours. At work, I get 0 to 6 hours of interrupted hypervigilant sleep per night. I have shift worker syndrome, which I manage with naps and melatonin. What is the difference between multiple shorter durations of sleep versus one long normal night of sleep? What are the pros and cons of these scenarios? I don't know about pros, but
You have a job.
so I guess the following scenarios. Oh, I got you. Number 1, come home at 8 a.m., go to bed for a few hours, train in the afternoon, feeling somewhat refreshed. This sometimes causes me to not be tired at bedtime. This is what I do most days. Number 2, get out of work and train right after breakfast, feeling tired, nap in the afternoon. Number 3, no naps, go to bed early. Often this doesn't feel like enough sleep. The deficit just grows if I have to work again the next day. It's not bad if I have the following day off and can sleep in a bit. JMO, this is exactly up your alley.
Yeah, so this is a really good question. Unfortunately, this is one of those things. As much as I would love to spin the wheel and say, okay, let's look at all of these. Ultimately, it's kind of a moot point because you're going to have to choose which ones are best for you based on how you experience it. So, couple things to look for. A, how well rested and refreshed do you generally feel on certain schedules, right? So are you able to get up, feel semi-normal, able to function properly, right? Okay, that's pretty easy. Number two, how well does your training go? You might find that running one of these scenarios is really good for your lifestyle, but then you find that your training is in the shitter, right? Number three, does it interfere with your work schedule, right? So you might have a scenario where one of these might be really good for lifting, and you might have really, really awesome sessions comparatively, but then it wipes you out when you actually have to be on shift. So those are kind of the big things, three things that I would look for, kind of the intersection of restedness, performance in the gym, and performance on the job. It's very difficult to say that any one of these is going to be better than the other because of the individual difference in responses. So I would say ultimately one of the things you want to shoot for is getting that weekly average up. However you get that, I usually don't factor naps into that. Naps are purely supplemental. They do not generally count towards your sleep. If you take a nap that goes for more than 2 hours, that's effectively just becomes sleep hours, which might not be the most ideal sleep hours, but you can kind of count those. But anything that's like an hour or less, that's just a nap. So try and shoot for that 8-hour per night weekly average. So again, you said you might get 0 to 6 on some nights. So that might mean that some days you might get like 10 collectively at some point. So those are the things that I would look for. As much as I would love to shoot pros and cons, there's so much individual difference in how you're going to respond to any of these. It's hard to say. Mike, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so the individual different stuff sounds like an interesting way to answer a question, but it's really like, okay, I was a big fan of number one, because it gives you a little bit of rest, and it seems like you like it, Kyle. It seems like it works because you get a little bit of rest for training. You have a good, and then you say that because of training, it goes well. You seem to be able to fall asleep at night, right? If you don't think it's a good one, then it's definitely just on you to figure out what's good. So the one that gives you the most, but like James said, physiologically, it all adds up to hours of sleep. So the one that gives you the most hours of sleep / makes you the most functional, that's the one that's going to work. Whichever one that is for you, that's what it's going to have to be.
Yeah, I agree. So it's hard to pick one outside of what you think seems to be working well for you. That's kind of going to be your best guiding light.
No, James, you would be surprised at sleep.
That
By the
doesn't
way,
work
real quick,
like you think it
no,
does.
sleep doesn't do what you think it does. Like just sleep. Wait, hold up.
Are you really making us wait while
Man,
you answer texts?
No. These are not very important things that I will share. It actually relates to sleep. So this here is my India successful visa application confirmation. Means I am invited to go to India, and I'm going there in tomorrow. And the funny thing is we have to take medicine to go to India because otherwise you die of malaria over there. And supposed to give you trippy dreams. And dreams for me last night were like pretty fucking cool. Super deep, super involved, like woof, awesome.
I heard that can give you like really gnarly nightmares.
You can only hope. I love shit like that. All right. Will Adams says, "Hey docs, still in the first month of what seems to be an acro job. BJJ, and trying to maintain a bodybuilding training and keep up weight as best as possible. Dr. Mike, I know you did a video on YouTube balancing weights with BJJ, which was great, and I've been using for guidance. My question is in terms of rolling easier or using technique when you're a new white belt like myself. I have very few techniques in my toolbox, but do have strength advantage over most everyone I roll with. I've been tempted to throw people off of me and use strength to get out of bad positions, but this leaves me exhausted and not a great learning experience. When I do try to roll lighter, I get tapped every 60 seconds. I don't feel shame in that I know jiu-jitsu is a long game and training is for improving, Any pointers on how should it be approaching practice? Well, Will, it's easy answer. Made it really yourself. It is the latter. Don't use a ton of strength. Try to use what techniques you have in every position that you end up. Try to think of, well, first you're going to think of, how do I use my basic jiu-jitsu toolbox that I've been learning to stay safe, right? So, for example, your arms are out here. That's usually bad. Take them shits and put them in here. Pretty much every position, right? Once you got a good base, breaking down your base and not pulling, you get them off of your arms, right? And make sure they're not pulling down your base. Once that happens, you're off to a pretty good start, and then you start working on moves that you maybe learned in class, like try this move, try that move. A couple favorites usually, and try work them every time you roll with people, and then you'll experience some success. You'll be able to guard, so on and so forth. And after about 6 months, you're going to have a little bit of a toolbox that, and then, I wouldn't use a whole lot of strength through that entire process. And then moves that start to work pretty well, and you're rolling after about 6 months to a year, that you decide the moves, when you're doing them properly, you could put a little bit more gas behind them. But don't put gas behind non-moves, because then, like you said, you're definitely on the right track of rolling lighter. Don't push people off of you. Learn the techniques, and it'll do you that much more good. It'll get you hurt less, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I think this applies to all sports, including combat sports. But remember, you're going to practice your day-to-day practice to learn, not to win, right? So if you're going in with the mindset of like, I have to beat everyone at all times, yeah, you can do that by out-strengthening them all the time, but you never actually get better at jiu-jitsu. So you're going there to learn, and then a very small subgroups of practices that prepare you for competition, you are there to kind of have a hybrid of both learning and winning, developing your strategies for competition. And then when you're in competition, you're there to win, right? So I think it's a very male testosterone mindset of like, oh, I need to win every position or every, drill movement. And that's natural when you're in a sport, especially combat sport. But remember, you're there to learn. So as a white belt and even upwards, as you move up in rank and blue, purple, all that stuff, remember, you're there to practice, you're there to rehearse and enhance your skills. There are times where you will be working on competition-specific scenarios, and you want to make sure you're doing them at live pace. But for the most part, at white belt, you're going there to learn, not there to outstrength everyone.
Yeah. Very, very good insight. All right. Daniel Hacker, a man whose only job is to hack the most advanced computer systems. Excellent. All right. Daniel says, if one is doing a 3-week maintenance phase after a breezy night, should they take the deload week after the cut? Should they take the deload week after the cut concludes, or into maintenance? Should they take a deload week after the cut concludes? I would say yes, because the deload week is at maintenance eating. And the 3-week maintenance is not the same thing as a deload, so I would say yes, take the deload week. I'll say something else until maybe James will disagree with this, but if there is a pretty sort of 60-40 decision to make about should I take the deload week or not, the answer is almost always yes. I don't know of anyone who has underachieved in their career because they took deload weeks when they sort of maybe could have but didn't. But I know plenty of people that have had their careers cut short because of injuries, et cetera, that have occurred from cutting deload weeks out. The way that, we're sort of propagandized to some extent by ourselves really in our sport culture, this extends to cinema, et cetera, is that the people, James, you've heard this shit your whole life being a wrestler, a football player, like, those who stay late in practice get better. You leave, you suck. Like, that's not really what makes you good, man. What makes you good is like wrestling the whole year, is with a couple vacations here and there, as opposed to just wrestling for 3 months. Like, no amount of wrestling you do during the season, no amount of staying late at practice is going to make you the best wrestler. It's the years of consistency and intelligent training that make you amazing. So people think like, oh man, I don't really need to deload. I'll just skip it, and this will make me greater. Like, no, the way you not training is to quit training for months on end. There's no amount of remotely logically structured deload weeks you could take that would start to be bad. James?
Yeah, that suggestion of be like the last one in the gym is only a good suggestion if your baseline is piece of shit. The rest of us, it's terrible. I don't see any real benefit of not taking the deload, right? There's certainly tons of costs, as Mike already basically alluded to. So I would say yes, take the deload, and ideally, I mean, you should need that deload. Even the maintenance phase, even though the volume is relatively easygoing, typically the intensity is a little bit higher. If you could, in theory, transition into that maintenance phase, I would be suspect of how your last couple weeks of the cut actually went. And I'm not wagging my finger at you, Daniel. I'm just saying it's very likely that at the very least you will need at least the first half of that deload to kind of bounce back before you can even handle the increase in intensity of the maintenance phase, is what I'm suggesting. So even if that is not the case, it's in your favor and your best interest to probably deload anyway.
All right, that's part one of many parts. Part two, what's the trade-off / cost benefit between a maximal amount of sets for an exercise versus leaving a few sets in the tank to allow for more exercise variation in a session for bodybuilding? Some variation is obviously necessary, but not too much. Bodybuilders are not powerlifters and therefore don't and probably shouldn't have to spend over half their leg workout squatting. However, if someone has no limitations, of course, they want to bias their training with as much of the barbell and dumbbell compound exercise as they can. Well, maybe not as much, but you need a good sort of steady, like, meat, potatoes dose. I don't know about as much as they can, but definitely you shouldn't. I'll put it this way. Yeah. A routine that doesn't have any of them in there is certainly going to come up as a little bit suspect. An example, if an individual can work up to, say, 8 sets of squats in a session, near the end of the meso, obviously, is it worth it for them to do so, knowing that after 8 sets of 7 to 10 reps on squats, they won't really be good for much else after, maybe a couple sets of leg press and leg curls and calves? I mean, who could? 8 sets is no fucking joke. What if the individual just stayed home at 5 sets of squats, still a good amount of volume if one is training the 12 rep range close to failure, and then had room for another quad move and enough juice to still do damage considerably to hamstrings and calves and maybe abs? Is that a worthy trade-off, or is there something unique about pushing higher set volumes with one exercise and accepting that they won't be as effective at putting in the succeeding work in the session? I picked 8 sets as an example because I think it's safe to say that just about anyone is going to be rocked after 8 sets of squats. I mean, yeah, pretty much. Really, really close to failure. Actually, forget the worthy trade-off. Wouldn't that actually be optimal, being that this is physique and not powerlifting, and a bodybuilder does want to train a muscle from a few different angles? Well, yeah. Well, so my biggest insight out of that, and we'll see what James has in a second, is actually exactly what you alluded to at the end there, Daniel. There is exercise variation within a session and within a week is beneficial, right? Because not all motor units are going to be hit, and not all fibers are going to be stimulated maximally with just one angle, no matter how complete that exercise is. Would never really be complete, because no one exercise is the best. Some are better than others, of course. But in order to get full motor unit recruitment, or as full as you can, you need to hit shit from a couple of angles. That being said, how many angles are we talking about? Probably 2 or 3, maybe 3 or 4 per week, at most 2 or 3 per session. So I would say that it's, at that point, a little bit on how you structure your program. And it could be that 8 sets of squats is actually what the doctor ordered. Here's an example of that. A program that has you doing squats and leg presses is a pretty holistic quad development program. But you could do 8 sets of squats one day and 8 sets of leg presses the next, day, Monday, Thursday. That's 16 sets of quads. That's all you need, and that's just 2 exercises. It's definitely possible. Would it be a little bit better to throw in a 3rd exercise there and maybe have one of those days at least be split into 2 exercises? Yeah, I think so. That is what it is. There's another interesting concern that I think that you did not bring up, but I would certainly consider it. And a lot of us who have trained in interesting ways over the past to test things out, or because we thought they were good ideas, run into this. You actually can get sort of acute joint irritation if you do enough sets of one thing, per workout, right? Like your quads might be sort of, great, more squats are the same. Your knees or your hips or whatever goes first with your squats might not really. It might be totally cool to do 6 sets, but 8 to 10 sets in a workout might just be too much. And not even per week, just in that workout. James, you ever do too much of a particular exercise in one session and you're like, wow, I'm starting to feel this in my bones?
Yeah, actually, front squats I have a distinct limit on front squatting. It's 3 or 4 sets. Can't go more than that.
Yeah, because other shit that you're not even targeting starts to go at that point.
Yes.
So Daniel, that's definitely a consideration. But I would say, what's a real like non-RP plus will but pretty good general advice takeaway. I think anything beyond 5 to sets, like 3 to 4 primary sets and 2 to 4 down sets, I think it's probably time to move on to a different exercise. On average, like that means there's some people who be able to do 10 sets of an exercise and be totally fine. But I think that there's more clever ways and more complete ways to train. So, instead of doing all squats, you could do squats and leg presses on one day, and you could do another variant stance of squats, with a lot, dumbbell lunges or barbell lunges on another day. It's still all quads, but just different angles, so on and so forth. So I think that those are the convincing ways to do it. James?
Yeah, that was really good. I would add 2 more points, which are actually could probably be consolidated into one main point, but just for discussion. So in addition to what Mike said, there is an effect of training age on the necessity of exercise variation. So what we find is that beginners benefit massively from very low exercise variation within a session and then within a mesocycle. They need to develop lots and lots of momentum on very few things to get really good at those, and those tend to carry them extremely well. As you move up into intermediate and advanced and highly advanced and so on, the need for additional exercise variants, and we're not talking about having like 6 to 8 variants per session necessarily, but we're saying as you move up in training age, this idea of, okay, I have my volume landmarks, can I get all my quad work from just squatting? The need to split that up becomes a little bit more apparent. And then my sub point, which is basically the same as, or at least highly correlated to training age, has to do with systemic or the combination of both systemic and local MRVs, where essentially, right, we're saying doing one exercise variant, as Mike said earlier, might cause a lot of wear and tear either on the joints being used or in other joints like your back. And that might be a limitation systemically or locally on something like quadriceps MRV. So the example here being, should you do necessarily 8 sets of high bar squats? Well, maybe you can do 4 or 5 really good sets of high bar squats, and then you might actually be able to do even more belt squats, right? You might even be able to get up to like 12 sets of quad work per week if you start doing belt squats instead, taking the load off your back, right? So now you're actually having a volume landmarks issue in addition to kind of the architectural angular issues that Mike already mentioned. So, and that those are both a product of training age essentially. So they kind of go hand in hand, but those are the only other things I would add.
Why don't we just beat this topic to death a little bit more? So 2 things jump out at me. One, when you have the problem of an exercise that you're doing, like you're considering that there's too many sets of it, I think that's probably a convincing, or not the convincing, the beginning of a discussion about expanding your training frequency. Right? Like, yes. This is a problem I've never run into with legs in the last 10 years because my legs MRV, because of how strong they are, so fucking low that I just, never a problem for me to get my leg volume in. 2 exercises per session or even 1, and I'm fucking completely done. So, if you're really like your MRV for legs is maybe 24 sets per week, I'd much rather see you at peak week do 3 quad workouts of 8 sets each than 2 quad workouts of 12 sets each. 12 sets, forget how many fucking exercises you're doing. That's fucking gnarly, right? And it's not even like, it might even exceed sort of like session to session MRV at that point before it exceeds weekly MRV. Like there's only so much you can cook your shit until you're like just overcooking the shit, right? So, man, actually James Krieger has a recent review where I highly recommend his site again, weightology.net. It's a really, really interesting thing where in literature is seeing the sort of the first indicators of a maximum recoverable volume or maximum adaptive volume emerging for session, right? And past some certain number of sets. I'm not going to get into it too much detail. Go check that out. I might talk about it later, but it might be like if you do like more than 10 sets per session of an exercise, it's just after that, it's like your muscles are like, that's all the hypertrophy stimulus you're going to get out of us. And then it's just needless damage after that, right? The opposite of junk volume, like damage volume.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a very similar idea of the junk volume. It's right.
You're not it's junk in the other direction.
Yeah, so you've essentially gone above and you've gone over the slope on your dose response curve for the session, which is what most people don't have a hard time thinking of.
Totally. So, and people can say like, well, but I need to do a lot of volume, but I can't do a lot of frequency. It's like, there's the very, very tight correlation between your MRV and your frequency tolerance. If your MRV for hamstrings is 8 sets per week, you probably can't do hamstrings every other day because it'll just fall off. Even if you adjust the frequency down, it's just too much damage, right, per session, and you don't recover from damage to that quick. But if you're someone whose MRV is 30 for back, you can probably train back every other day, because if your MRV is really 30 and you do 8 sets and then you rest a day, you probably will be pretty fucking recovered. It's not like this magically 8 sets also fucks you up a ton all the way up to 30. So give that some thought. Another one, you brought up an interesting part of your example. I don't know if you meant to do this, but you said, I'm like doing a ton of quad stuff. Should I save it to leave some room for calves and hamstrings? Daniel, I'm going to sort of point out the fact that you're actually asking 2 very different questions. They're not opposing questions, but they're very different in the way we'd answer them. The first question, James and I just beat to death as far as how much you want to do of the quads for various exercises. That's one thing. The other thing is, how much do you want to save for other muscle groups? Well, geez, Daniel, that's a whole other question altogether. Specifically, it comes up with, trade-offs and costs and benefits of, well, how much do you want to develop your hamstrings and calves? What does your weekly sort of microcycle plan look like? For example, if you have to do a very easy session of hams and calves one day a week and then a harder session the next day, is it okay to do a ton of squats on the easy hamstring and calf session? Yeah, because you don't have to recover for your hamstrings and calves. What I do is on my easy ham and calf stuff, I actually do them first, almost as part of my warm-up. Like I'll have, James, you've seen me do this. I'll do calves first, I'll do hamstrings after, and then I'll do leg press, and then I'll do squat. Yeah. And people are like, why the hell do you flip them over like that? Because after I do leg press and squat, I'm just not doing anything. Like I'm just done. Right? I'd much rather do my hams and calves as a warm-up. But it doesn't matter how you do them necessarily. It's how much total do you want to allocate to each one. That's a very different question than how many exercises you do. As a matter of fact, I would posit the following, that if you're really doing stimulative work, it doesn't so much matter if you leave room for leg press after squat, because if either you do squat more or leg press more. If it's a standard, let's say 8 sets of quad work, that still leaves you pretty fucked for your hamstrings and calves either way. So the real question you're asking on top of that is, well, should I do 6 sets of quad work instead and leave some more sets for it? Well, that's a design question based on other constraints we can't answer. James, you got anything to add to that?
No, you nailed it.
Right on. All right. Next, so on this subject, to that point, if someone is doing 8 to 10 sets for the same movement, is it fair to say that they should be doing 2 a days to account for the fatigue from that exercise, or it's just not worth doing? Thinking about someone like Jared, I know he works up to set numbers like this, and I'm sure there's no way he could do all the work he needs to for the requisite body parts and still perform 8 to 10 sets of an exercise. Thus, another reason why he splits his session. Mike, I'm sure you are the same, not given your training frequency. Yeah, I mean, like, again, it's not, Daniel, you're on the right track, but just to remind you, it's not per exercise that's necessarily the limiting factor. It's the total amount of volume you do for a muscle group. Like, if you have to do 12 sets of chest, how much tricep work can you do after? Not much, right? If you 12 sets of triceps, how much chest can you do after? Not much. But if it's 12 sets of skull crushers versus 12 sets of overhead extensions versus half and half, I mean, fuck, does it really matter? It's 12 sets of triceps. Now, if you're saying these are more compound exercises, are more taxing, that's totally true. But then that's all sort of very spectrum trade-offs, right? It's like, okay, how compound is the exercise? How many sets of it am I doing? How much energy does that leave me with for other exercises later on? And you're absolutely right. What you're really talking about here, Daniel, is what we in the recovery book define as intra-session MRV, like your ability to recover enough from earlier in the session to continue to provide an overload later in the session. Like deadlifts are a really good example of this. You might have, and it's funny because people build workouts like this, and they sort of don't have enough experience by themselves or training other people to know what kind of hilarious workout they build. They'll say, okay, I'm going to have my athletes do 6 sets of deadlifts and then 6 sets of squats. And the real answer to that is, okay, just forget squats, just do 6 sets of leg presses after deadlifts. Like, why not squats? Well, the deadlifts are going to take your back MRV and exceed it. Yeah. Like within that workout, intra-session MRV, so that your squats are just going to go absolutely nowhere. But if you lie down on a machine and use only your legs, you might be able to get some good quad work out of the whole situation. Now, there's also like a central, James, you ever seen any athletes or any people you trained hit like a systemic intra-session MRV where like they pull their last eight deadlifts and they're just like, I'm done. Like, I'm done being here.
Oh yeah. I'd say that's more common, I think, than the other. I think
Yeah.
then the other way around. Ironically,
I've seen Charlie hit that a lot, where he'll just start basically
done.
like
Just fucked.
total body cramping. He's like, I physically can't stand up. I'm like, okay, well, I guess we're done training quads then. Like, there's just nothing to do anymore.
Yeah, and that's when you see in sport a lot too. Like at sport practice, people are just like, I can't do anything.
Totally.
They're just done. Yeah.
All right. Daniel continues. Sticking with the same topic, I'm going to beat this to death because this has been on my mind for a long time and I want it all out there. I watched James's video on downsets multiple times, watched RP videos on variation, Chad's videos on variation, as well as I've read Scientific Principles a bunch of times and listened to seemingly every podcast you guys have done. But this per exercise versus variation, sets per exercise versus variation for the body part topic really makes me think. If an individual goes to the MRV in a big move like bench squats or bent rows, naturally the MRV will be lower overall, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that their MRV for that body part and they would be suited to do more if their training were organized differently. Absolutely.
Yes.
So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I could do 5 sets of bent rows and 3 sets of pull-ups, but if I just do 4 sets of bent rows, I could do 6 sets of pull-ups because I'll be that less fried, but it's more work for my back. Totally, which is a lot of reason why you see with bodybuilders, people will say, like, this is like something that I think pisses us all off. Like PubMed warriors will watch a video of like a huge bodybuilder do chest flies and then bench and then do incline dumbbells and be like, why didn't they do flies after bench? Like, you fucking dumb asshole. If they didn't make their chest weaker with flies, they'd have to bench so much to get it to stimulate that they would just never do anything after the bench. Like, it's pretty exhausting as a way to get local fatigue and local, closer failure and damage, etc., without making sure that the systemic the number one driver of it. So,
and that's why I was saying not to do that last week. God damn it, because you're not that person. Not you, Mike. I'm saying people, most of the viewers, including myself,
for sure.
You're not strong enough to do that. You don't need to do that. You're just gonna get pec tears from doing those heavy ass pec flies.
For sure. So if anyone's like, oh, I don't know why that bodybuilder would do that, well then don't do it, because if you can't relate to it, you can't relate to it. But if for the first time ever,
you're not.
That's right. If for the first time ever, you do a workout where you do leg presses first and then squats after, and everything feels 50 times better, and you can do more volume. Congratulations, welcome to the advanced club. Like, now that you know. Where if you can do squats first and leg presses after, not bad at fucking high, then fuck, man, no problem. Then I guess you're not in that club.
Speaking of bodybuilders and advanced ones at that, I watched the Ronnie documentary on Netflix.
Charlie said he teared up during it.
Okay, so I don't want to get off topic too far here. So overall, it seemed like the production was done by like a bunch of 21-year-olds. It was really stupid. But the footage of Ronnie and hearing his insights was very awesome. So like it was like a trade-off of like, it was just like kind of stupidly produced. Not in the sense that like the sound was bad or the video. It was just like, I just wasn't into the way they presented it. But yeah, the way, I mean, like, God damn, he is so fucked up and he's so positive at the same time. They're like, wow, Ronnie, you really fucked up. He's like, huh, yeah, I guess. I love my kids.
Oh my God.
You're like, how can you not love this guy? He's so awesome. Just like,
pretty much everything said about
I'm not supposed to train anymore, no more, but I still like to train. Here's my gym.
That's so
like,
sweet.
Ooh-wee, I'm in pain. That's pretty much it.
Crystal and I are going to finish the second half of the Matt Kroc movie, Transformer.
Wait, where is that?
It's on Amazon.
Is it? Oh, okay. I want to watch that too.
So we watched half of it. It's fucking really good. It's really good. He's just like a better person than most people. Like, whatever gender he ends up being or anything in between, he's just great. And you just like, it's so funny because he's more masculine than pretty much any other man that's ever walked the earth, and they can't dog him on that. So it's like when he's like, I felt like I've been a woman, like in my entire life, I felt like a feminine side to me and I wanted to explore it. You can't be like, look, beg. Like, no, was the strongest 220 pounder in the world. He's a United States Marine. Like, he's more manly than you automatically.
That,
so
like, you have like a hyper masculine person.
Yeah.
Who has this odd, I say odd, but like, it seems uncharacteristic given how manly he appears, right? To have this like feminine side to the point of becoming transgendered. It's just strange to us.
Totally. It's totally cool. I'll probably make an Instagram post about it once I've done watching it. But I would totally hang out with Matt, Janae. I'd hang out with all of them. You know what I'm saying? It's just a fucking awesome person. So
Janae or Janae.
but Jesus Christ, I don't think he's turning into that. Dude, did you see Mackie and his girlfriend at the wedding? Where
it took me a minute, but then I was like, "Oh, you're Forrest and Jenny." Okay.
Yeah, so RP's Chris McDonald came to my wife and I's wedding party. We had a party, but it was a dress-up Halloween party. That's the only way to do it. And he was Forrest Gump. He had the outfit to the T, and then his girlfriend was Jenny, and she had like the '60s look. It was amazing. And Mackie stayed in character the entire night.
Yeah, he RP'd as in role play, not Renaissance Transition.
Yeah,
he
100%. We should start an RP coach's LARPing team and just let Jen actually hurt people.
No, I think because she would be the first one to take it too far, right? Where like real hitting. That's first one.
Sweet. Well, I don't know. Mel is pretty fucking violent too.
That's true. I don't know if Mel would want to. She's always like, "Oh yeah, I'll do stuff," and then she ends up just working.
Yeah, that's the story of all of our lives. Mm-hmm. All right,
which is good. She's productive.
Let's see.
So I think did we actually answer his question? So he was asking.
We did, but it's not done. It's not done yet. Consider the following structure for an individual that's overreaching and is an intermediate, relatable to a lot of the folks here, I'm sure. Quad day number 1, 8 sets of high bar squats for 7 to 12, either all the same weight or a mix of top and down sets. Following maybe 2 sets of walking lunges. Quad day number 2, 8 sets of hack squats. This is 20 sets for quads in a week. Certainly no joke. That doesn't have, oh yeah, that's 18, but I guess 2 sets of hack squats plus 2 sets of walking lunges. Okay. Okay. Certainly no joke, but what if the individual in question ranged something like this? Quad day 1, 5 to 7 sets of squats and 5 times walking lunges. Quad day 2, the 5 sets of hacks and 5 times another quad move. Yeah, I think that's a little bit better, but more specifically, for the reason you mentioned, it depends on what the other quad move was. So let's play super devil's advocate just for the point of sort of using our sort of skeptics toolbox, our logical toolbox, and practicing with it to do what is really principle-based thinking. I said that it depends on what that other quad move is, and here's why. Imagine that the other quad move was partial squats. So we got 7 to 12, 5 sets of squats, 5 sets of walking lunges. Okay, great. And the next quad day is 5 sets of hack squats and 5 sets of partial squats to the pin. I mean, that'd be fucking awful. I would fucking 50 times, do the first one way more. So the big advantage is that axial to appendicular loading, right? If the axial loading is systemic loading is really starting to be a problem, getting the loading to be more peripheral to the quads themselves is advantageous. So it's not so much the magic of variation as it is the magic of directed variation, because there's a purpose to vary.
So I've actually been experimenting with this since I work out at home. My exercise variation options are pretty limited, right? So it's like usually like, what do we do for quads? Well, you got squat variations and not much else. So one of the things that I've been using lately, and I feel like I've been actually having a lot of success with it, is the belt squat. Now, I'll preface this by saying I don't have particularly strong quads. I mean, I can do on a really good day 315 for like 4x8 kind of thing. So I'm not the strongest squatter in the world, I admit that, but I will do my main squat workout. And I might even do down sets of squats. So I might do like 4 to 8 sets of squats. And then if I need more quad volume, which I typically do, I will add the belt squats after I've already been pretty fatigued. And for me, I have to use the belt to choke up on the belt and then stand on some bumper weights to get the appropriate depth. But when my back and my SI will start to flare up, which I know it will, I'll switch over to belt squats and I can actually get a lot more quad volume, and I can actually feel it in my quads even more. Maybe that's just a product of being warmed up, and I can admit that, but I tend to feel it more in the belt squats where I put it down and I go, oh, wow, actually, man, I'm getting a really good pump all of a sudden. So there's little things like that where you have to, that's where individualization comes in, where you say, I know that the barbell high bar squat is probably the biggest bang for my buck in terms of time spent doing or volume spent doing and growth and strength. But at some point it's unsustainable to just keep doing high bar squats. And I need to find variations that work for me and I get a lot out of it that won't, hit my systemic MLV. So that's where like individualizing your training really can come in handy.
Yep. He says volume still the same, still getting 5 times exercise, which is a lot, but won't be as fatigued from one exercise, so they can present more of a stimulus for the other moves, and still work the quads in a few different ways. For physique, wouldn't this approach be actually better than doing an ungodly amount of squats? A couple sets of something else, and then a godly amount of squats later in the week? Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Just improved variation. What could probably do even more work? Maybe. A 20 set example could maybe become 22 or 24. Again, that depends on if you're peripherally limited or centrally limited in your MRV, two different things. Because they're not carrying as much fatigue as they did 7 to 10 squats or one exercise. One of the responses that one could give here to the retort would be like, yeah, this would work, but now you're using 4 variants for the same body part. That's too much. It's not too much as long as you got some other ones to replace them every now and then. Given there are so many ways to change up the exercises, load sets, full placement, etc., just different patterns overall. Am I really overdoing variation here? No, I don't think you are. I know I said a lot. I'm excited to hear both your responses.
One thing to add too, and so you might, on the topic of variation, this is, I kind of want to get away from it because we have a lot of questions and I don't want to beat this one to death too much, but you make a good point of saying like, okay, I need to be conscious of how many exercise variations I'm using throughout a mesocycle, right? It doesn't mean that less is bad or more is bad, but I just need to be aware of it. Why? Because I need to make sure that I'm appropriately using variation within the mesocycle and week to week, right? So that's good. But then you also think about, okay, I also want to think about variation across mesocycles. So if I have, 8 quad variations within the mesocycle, that might not be the worst thing in the short term, like within week to week or even within the mesocycle. But as you move across mesocycles, now you're actually running out of actual variants that you can use. So now you can benefit less from variation across time is essentially a consideration. So you have to think about it in the short term and the long term. And if you're going to be using a lot of variations, you might actually find yourself having to rely more on momentum and using the same across mesocycles, whereas others might use more variation across mesocycles with less variance, if that makes sense. Or did you follow my train of thought there, or was I rambling?
No, it makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Always a trade-off there. So I think a middle ground for both is a good place to start.
Yes, exactly.
All right, another question from Daniel. I started doing forearm training this past block. Using your guidelines, I started with barbell wrist curls for sets of 10 to 12 twice a week. Just increasing weight by 5 pounds each session. After 2 weeks, I added a set to each session, bumping the volume to 6 sets per week. Moreover, each week, I kept the previous intensity and went up to 8 sets per week. When I program forearms again the next meso, where do I go from there? Same exercise again, but higher intensity? Absolutely. I wouldn't. Again, James said when you're a beginner on something, you conserve your exercise variance considerably. And maybe push to 10 sets at the end, increase variation. What's the best play? Well, I don't think there's a best play. There are some pretty good ones. I think increasing variation is totally needless. I would keep just the one exercise in for months, and I would slowly get stronger on it, and then potentially do a little bit more sets, but not even. I would just keep the volume relatively low. Maybe 10 sets total per week as the highest number you do for a while, and just seek to get stronger at it, because I think that's how beginners can put on a lot of muscle while still getting their volume to be not so high that it interferes with technical development, blah, 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 so on and so forth, and not risking going over MRV too early when you're not really in touch with how that body part responds. So I would just say, just get stronger for a while. And then after a couple of months, maybe 6 months, you can throw in different exercises, start undulating the volume, or sort of creeping up in volume, creeping back down, creeping up, going MEV to MRV after that. So I think the training should be really as basic as it can for as long as it can.
Yes.
James?
That was perfect. And the only thing, Daniel, I would say is, when Mike says you're a beginner, he only means contextually as it pertains to forearm training, right? That you're a beginner, as if I threw you a rugby ball and I was like, go ahead and play rugby, right? Well, you've never done it before. You have been training for a long time, but in this particular context, you have not. So you may be an intermediate as far as most other things are concerned, but in terms of this, you might find yourself doing more beginner type strategies, just to be clear.
Last one, because this just happened. I just finished a cut and I've DEXA at 12 to 13%. I've been dieting for 9 weeks and I'm going to be traveling, so I plan on maintaining for 3 weeks. I plan to do a prolonged mass after this cut because I plan to end at 10%. Clearly, this didn't happen. You actually don't know if it didn't happen because the DEXA is not that accurate. Should I still do the mass after 3 weeks? Yes. After 3-week maintenance, should I do one more meso of cutting, train at my highest volumes for the cut, increase the cardio, and then go to massing? No. What's the best play? I just want to clarify a previous question. I'm going to do 3 weeks of maintenance no matter what. The question is what to do best here to post maintenance. I think you're plenty lean to go on a nice long mass and then reevaluate. And I think that I would be careful with DEXA results right after a cut. Who the fuck knows? You look pretty clean. You have good abs and some veins. Fucking go for it. If you need to lose more fat and you're kind of sloppy looking or just not quite there, then you can do another cutting phase just like you described. But honestly, if you feel lean enough to mass, 12 to 13% is a fine place to start massing from. 10 is not a religious number. You also can't tell if it's 10 or not because DEXA.
I totally agree, and I'm going to ask this question at my own peril. So if he says he's going to do the 3 weeks of maintenance no matter what, at that point, would it be better to do the 3 weeks of maintenance, mini cut, and then go into massing, or do you not think it matters?
I think that's what it is. So we said it's a 4-to-1 paradigm cut. That's by definition a mini cut. Absolutely.
Oh, I missed that. Sorry. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yep.
My
so
bad.
It is a mini cut. Yeah, and that would be a really good point. For a mini cut, you just need to clean it up just a little bit more, and that would be okay. But
no, sorry, that he clearly stated that. I just missed it.
That was a very perilous question.
I know. Right. I was opening the wheel box at my own peril.
Passiformule. Wow, goddamn, dude,
that's a spicy fucking name. Now, in the thing, it was hyphenated, so I wasn't sure if that was. If it was, because it was like spanning 2 lines and it was hyphenated, so I wasn't sure if it was meant to be hyphenated or if it was just 2 lines of, you know what I mean? I don't know, but either way, it's a spicy name.
All right. Good evening, legendary space warriors.
Oh, sorry, that is a joke.
Fake name. That makes sense.
Did you catch it at all?
No.
So there's like the Euro DBZ. Stuff, all the dubs, they substitute Space Warriors for the word Saiyan.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
When I was making this, I started laughing, and I was like, "What's so funny?" I was like, some guy posted like a really funny inside like Dragon Ball Z joke.
I remember that dumbass dub. It was so awful. It was like they did it as a joke.
Legendary Warriors of Space.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched it, like just search like Legendary Space Warriors DBZ or something like that, and there's like all these European dubs where they don't say Saiyan, they say Legendary Space Warriors. It's really bad.
Yeah. Fuck. All right. Lucas says, I work a physically demanding job at a metal shop. Most days I'm just trying to design a lot of objects that are shaped like dicks, and I don't know why. Can you please? No, I'm just kidding. You didn't say that.
Metal dicks.
Most days I can walk anywhere between 15 to 25,000 steps. Usually a couple days of the week, I'm also basically doing HIIT workouts for hours on end with baskets full of metal parts. Not fun.
That sucks.
I'm constantly thinking about how this affects my systemic MRV and how I should alter my training. I'm not competitive. Yeah, I'm not competitive, and I know that this type of work, my training will not be optimal. Is there a way to fully optimize the training that I can get done? Well, it's not going to be fully, but if there's a way to optimize it within your current realm.
It's optimal within your constraints for sure. Yeah.
So right now I'm doing the 3-day full body template, and I'm cutting. My current approach is to do body part emphasized metacycles for massing. So I can really make noticeable gains as I'm only about 3 years into training, but I feel like I can barely make any progress while doing full body emphasis. But I shouldn't feeling beat up and run down all the time. And he says, something to add to my earlier question. The forum wouldn't let me edit, so I'm posting this 1,000 years after my first question. On my current cutting cycle, I was losing about 2 pounds a week at 5'4", 162. I'm cut 1 tab. I'm assuming this might be exaggerated since it has only been 2 weeks. This week I lost 0.3 pounds. I switched to cut 2, and now on non-training days, I feel like the world is flipped upside down. My question is, taking into account the amount of extra calories burned at work, should I count my work days as light days? Fuck no, they're moderate at least.
Yeah, I was gonna say moderate.
Moderate,
and then you're like when your training days and when you work and train, it might be
hard.
Hard, yeah.
Yeah. I would say your best modification is twofold. Number one, I think you should not train 3 days a week, but train 4, because you're getting 3 years into your training. I think, especially with the catabolic nature of your work, you're going to need a little bit more weight training to counterbalance that. So I would say 4 or more days of training per week. I would also say the following: you don't ever have to do cardio. It's amazing. You do cardio work. So what I would say is you can probably mass more aggressively, mass for longer, and not get fat compared to what you would be able to do. Because fuck, you do cardio all the goddamn time. So your job is actually pretty fun. Eat up, get fucking as many calories as you can in, so on and so forth. And your mini cuts will basically be like just backing away from the food a little bit, and all of a sudden you're going to be lean again. So
that's what I was going to say.
Take advantage of that. Mm-hmm.
I mean, dude, like you're going to be able to mass for really long stretches at a time, and you're going to do just fine with a mini cut. Like take your calories down a little bit, and you're going to drop a ton of weight, and then you'll be able to mass again. And this is something that you will be able to sustain very easily. It's a blessing and a curse, right? Because you're physically active all the time, which is tough, but it's really good in the sense that you don't have to spend, a huge chunk of every year cutting anymore. Your cuts are going to be short and sweet, and that's awesome.
Yep. Sega Sangare says, "Hey guys, with the announcement of Juggernaut Training Systems AI coaching, is RP going to explore the AI realm within the next 5 to 10 years as well?" Let me unequivocally say something. I speak for both James and myself and Renaissance Periodization as a company. We're never going to do AI coaching because a robot will never understand your emotional human side, which is the most important thing that Renaissance Periodization bring to the equation, is feelings. James Hoffman right there, folks, is one of our best feelings coaches. He only emotes. He is literally incapable of logic. James's brain has been on functional magnetic resonance imaging, been analogized to that of a dolphin, a purely emotional creature full of only love and a connectivity with the rest of sentient beings.
Well, some might argue that to be truly sentient, you have to understand suffering, which I know very well. So
through your exposure to metal music.
Yes.
Which is really like oral suffering, even to all of us who hate it, and it is suffering when we listen to it. I did.
No, it's true.
Like metal, there's two ways to listen to metal, and both lead to suffering. One, you actually love it and you listen to it and you suffer because the lyrics are so fucking brutal, and the other way is you fucking hate it and you're suffering because it's so fucking loud and obnoxious. So either way, it sucks.
Yes, and there are some bands who deliberately make their production quality really bad. It sounds like they had a mini tape deck in a room, and that's how they recorded the album. So then it also causes physical suffering at that point as well.
Yeah. Sega, how do I answer your question truthfully? The truthful answer to your question is that we are not developing anything remotely like AI coaching. It's not happening. The Death Star plans have not been stolen. A whole lot of line reading here, JMO. A whole lot of between the lines reading.
Y'all motherfuckers ever heard of Skynet?
We're making Skynet.
That's what we're talking about.
You know how RP knows when you're supposed to eat your next meal? Because we're watching. Well, not we, our army of machines. So I would recommend staying on the lookout for further announcements on that exact thing. But you didn't hear it here. You didn't fucking hear it anywhere. All right.
Especially as it pertains to Nick Shaw.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely. Nick Shaw is like Darth Vader. He's like, "What have Mike and James told you?" Like, with nothing, sir. He's like,
I like the scene in Star Wars where the generals are coming up on Vader and his helmet is off and it's like coming down onto his head. Yep. That's how I envision that exact scenario.
Ugh. Damn, that boy face fucked up. Another one is I envision a scene where the death.
Sorry, it's like his cell phone coming down for him to like.
That's right, yeah, because it was just cell phone integrated. What are you doing, Darth Shaw? Checking emails, you fool. Oh,
Code Red.
All right, I suppose that's what you're always doing. Okay. Like the Death Star is positioning itself to like fire on a moon, and then what's his name? Valdez's uranium dirigible, which is now double the size of the Death Star, floats by, and it like shits a bunch of smoke out. It even shits out smoke in space for no reason. Like it operates a combustion engine in space, but it brings its own oxygen just to be super wasteful. And then it like the Death Star can't even aim because this cloud of smoke is like, why are we not firing at that moon? Like, Augustine Valdez is around. Like, God damn it.
There's a giant Ethernet cable in the way. We can't.
Yes, it's threaded between planets. He has another ship moving it between planets.
Just shoot through it. Like, we can't. It's insulated.
I don't like this bullshit space crap with this teleportation. I need Ethernet. Ahora.
Oh, man.
Now that we're done with that. Luciano Bruno Kuschel says, Hello, docs. I got a couple questions this time around. P.S. Love the modifications to the new training template, seeing as they're exactly what I needed. Yahoo!
Nice.
You know, Luciano, we actually modified them exclusively for you and made everyone suffer through modifications. It'll never work for them.
Everyone else was kind of
Number one, looking at the FAQ of the new male physique templates, RP recommends cutting on the two basic mesos 1 and 2. Yep. While maintaining in the metabolite meso and resensitization meso 4.
You
could do that. Yeah.
I think cutting and massing generally will be done 1, 2, 3, and then 4 will be maintenance.
Yes. What's the reasoning behind maintaining a meso 3? I don't know if that's in there. Please, if it's in there, let us know and give us the exact quote. I don't know if that's in there exactly like that. If it is, I think that's actually probably intended for sort of regular folks that use it and are not super physique focused folks. But we'll get back to that. I'd just like to see the wording. Is it because possibly cutting too long, 12 plus weeks? In that other case, wouldn't it be cut on mesos 1 and 2 and maintain on multiple cycles of meso 4 for at least 2 to 3 for the previous duration before continuing the cut? Well,
it might be for those who are doing a 10-week cut and then a 1-to-1 time spent on maintenance. I'm not sure, but
yeah. Well, so I'll tell you this. So most people,
it also might be a typo, frankly. So
yeah. Well, so it could be. The thing is, I think a lot of people who use the templates are folks that are, their maintenance is not mostly to deal with the excessive training volumes. It is mostly to deal with excessive dieting durations. A lot of the folks that use the male physique templates, probably most, use them as it's a fat loss phase and then a maintenance phase and then the fat loss phase again. So they'll recycle. So for those folks, the metabolite meso would actually be done in the maintenance phase nutritionally, and you would recover your nutritional fatigue from dieting, not enough calories, not enough energy, hormonal perturbations, etc., while training at high volumes, which is cool because you probably gain some good muscle then, and then certainly reestablish muscle loss on the fat loss phase. And then that last little bit of maintenance is meso 4. It really brings down the training-related fatigue. By then, the diet-related fatigue is almost completely gone, and then you start back at meso 1 and 2, and that's your fat loss phase. So the way to structure that for yourself, again, it's really difficult for us to recommend how to do, what phase and what phase, because it ends up being one of these things where we're not, we can't, with templates, expand to everyone having everything go well for them. Like, this is what you should do. This is when you cut. This is when you mask. It really depends on your own schedule and the way you structure things. That is a good way to do it, but maybe not in your particular case and many other cases where advanced hypertrophy stuff takes precedence. Number 2, still regarding the templates, do you guys recommend adding sets to one training session to prevent a volume overload? The overall volume is the same or lower as the same training session in the previous micro.
Wait. Sorry. I thought you said prevent. I was like, wait, what? My bad.
Oh, sorry, to present. That's what I thought. That's what I said. Do you guys recommend adding sets to one training session to present a volume overload? The overall volume is the same or lower as the same training session of the previous micro, despite the ratings of the template. For example, week 3, dumbbell bench press is 30 kilograms per 10, 10, 9, 870 units of volume. Week 4, 32 by 8 reps, 736 units of volume. No, we do not, and here's why.
Thank you.
Because it's been shown that hypertrophy mirrors hard set number better than it mirrors mathematical volume. So what you're talking about there is mathematical volume, sets times reps times weight verbatim. Mathematical volume is a consideration of hypertrophy, but if we got big volumes, we would be getting the most jacked people ever be marathon runners because their mathematical volumes are completely insane. Intensity matters in a nonlinear fashion. So what I mean by that is this, that if you train heavier, then you need less mathematical volume to get the same hypertrophy effect. But you need roughly the same amount of volume as number of sets. So number of sets, because it allows for that reduction in mathematical volume, but the expansion in weight, it basically is a better proxy than mathematical volume. So in other words, and this is very similar relationship to fatigue as well. So what happens is, yes, even though your week 3 is less mathematical volume than your week 4, because your week 4 is heavier, your hypertrophic stimulus is either the same or higher. And of course, if you keep rating pluses, it'll just get higher, period, right? Because it'll just add sets, right? So I wouldn't be so concerned about it. Just rating the templates usually adjusts everything because it adjusts set numbers, which are a better proxy for hypertrophy than mathematical volume. That being said, you're losing reps on stuff, which probably isn't great, and I would re-examine your ratings because of that. James?
Yeah, so that was kind of the point I was going to end on. So like all that stuff that Mike said is 100% true. So we might find that like, you know, that the two examples might be kind of equivocal across time, and it's hard to say equivocal across time, but just for the sake of argument, like got the job done, check, right? That being said, volume is still probably your best kind of general proxy. Not necessarily volume load as calculated like this, but just kind of in general, like Mike said, like number of sets. So in this case, if you find that, let's say you did week 4, 32 kilograms, 887 kind of thing, and you really didn't get a ton of soreness, stiffness, you didn't really get fucked up that much, and your units of volume did in fact go down despite the increase in intensity, just add another set and see how that goes. Right now, you might say, okay, but adding another set puts me over my MRV. Fine, boom, that's totally okay. Until you run into that problem, you probably want to go up in volume either way.
All right, number 3, seeing as that both of you have a PhD, I would really be interested in what your career opportunities look like aside from academia and RP after you finish your PhDs. I just successfully finished my national examination. I'm currently finishing my bachelor in physical therapy in Germany, but excellent. Working conditions suck here. Excellent, not excellent. Which is the reason I would like to change to exercise science. I have an opportunity to do a master and potential doctorate in exercise science. I love working with patients, but I would also love to do more research on exercise and health. Yet I'm not too keen on teaching in an academic setting, which makes me wonder what other options are to do research and earn money outside of academia. Thanks, JMO. That's all you.
Yeah, so you're kind of in a bit of a conundrum here, and I think Mike's going to have a lot to say. I'm going to start it off, and then I'm sure Mike's going to have a lot to say after this. So research is great. Research, however, is not a money-generating field, at least in exercise science, health sciences, and kinesiology in general. You can do fine. You can have a reasonable wage, but it's going to be a lot of hours, a lot of time spent in the lab, and not a huge amount of payout compared to something like physical therapy, where I don't know what it's like in Germany, but I'm pretty sure physical therapy generally does a little bit better than teaching here in the United States. I'm not willing to go to make a huge bet on that, but I'm willing to make a small bet on that. That being said, if you do not have an extensive background in research, getting an associate professor level job coming out of college will be kind of difficult, will be pretty difficult. This is after getting your PhD. So what I'm trying to say, and as concisely as I can, if you do not already have a substantial number of publications under your belt now, and as you move through grad school, becoming a research professor in the field will be very, very difficult, if not damn near impossible. So then what are your alternatives after that? Well, if you're not going to be a research tenure track professor in exercise science, guess what you're doing next? You're teaching, homie. And if you don't like teaching, you're in it for a world of hurt. So I would say if teaching is not on the table for you, you might consider doing your master's degree and then working in the private sector into something that you really like. And there's plenty of people who have a background in physical therapy and strength and conditioning who can do really, really well in the private and even in the university setting. Working for a university strength conditioning or athletic training setting would be really good. My recommendation would be this: if getting a PhD is on your bucket list, do it. If it's not on your bucket list, meaning it's not something that you have intended to do your entire life, don't do it. It's not worth it. And the job prospects are not necessary. They're better. If you wanted to say, okay, James, on pen and, if you're going to say yes or no, are the job prospects better with PhD? The answer is yes. But is it better if you're doing something that you don't like and it sucks for you? No, it's not better, right? It's like, okay, yeah, you can make money, but so I think having a PhD gives you almost limitless opportunities. Does not give you limitless happiness. So just be aware. You might find that doing a master's degree is sufficient to open up private sector opportunities that you didn't have before and can be extremely lucrative, especially if you're a savvy business person. Academia is tough. And if you're not already like balls deep into the research world, you're going to have an uphill battle trying to get into it later on. Does that make sense?
Dude, it makes sense perfectly to me. I don't actually have anything really to add. PhD is something, in most things, PhD is a matter of passion. If you really just want to know that much more, or you need to know that much more, people go get PhDs, for example, in something called quantitative finance. When they do stock trading, you get a PhD in quantitative finance because you just have to do an unbelievable amount of really crazy formal math, which takes a fucking PhD in order to be good at that stuff. When you're good at it, you make a shitload of money. But are there other ways to make a shitload of money in trading? Yeah, totally. And a lot of them don't require any fucking education at all. So, in sports science, a PhD might be necessary to work at the very highest levels. But in a lot of other things, PhD is kind of like you just sort of want to learn more stuff, and maybe that'll, you might have a plan to become profitable off that, but you really do it because you just want to learn more. I mean, number one reason I got my PhD is because there's stuff I just needed to know, and I was going to do it. So if you really love the stuff, then you'll make it work and you'll find a way to make money out of it. If you really don't, and you're thinking, ooh, I could get a PhD and that'll make me have more money, that's not going to happen. Very unlikely.
Yeah. And and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy here, but just to be very clear, getting a PhD is a world of suffering. There's nothing, people think that like, oh, I can just go to school and get my PhD, right? It's going to be great. No, it's not great. There's nothing great about it. In fact, it fucking sucks. You do it because it was something that you had to do. Mike and I were going to get our PhDs if it killed us. It was going to happen one way or another. And it didn't matter. Exercise science and sport physiology just happened to be what we found to be the best intersection of education and interest, right? It was going to happen. If you are on the fence, I would say it's not worth the suffering. And I'm not trying to paint it in a negative picture, but I just want you to understand the trade-offs. It's a lot of trade-off if it's not on your bucket list. That's all I'm saying. So sorry if that sounded negative. It's not meant to be negative. But I get a lot, this is something we saw at Temple where students would be like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about doing my PhD. I'm not sure this or that. And I'd be like, no, if you're not sure, then no, the answer is no.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like thinking about joining the Foreign Legion. Like you're either passionate about joining the Foreign Legion or it's not a place you're going to want to be. Because when there's mosquitoes up your ass in like fucking Djibouti or something, you're going to wonder what the fuck you did.
It's like, would you volunteer to go fight in the war in Iraq? Right? Like, some people would say, absolutely, 100%, I'm going. And a lot of other people would be like, I don't know, I might die. Then don't go, right? Yeah, like, that's it. 100%. Same idea.
Kevin Dunn says, hi, Docs. I'm currently beginning week 2 of the new MPT.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I didn't mean it was on the scale of war. I just meant in the terms of the mindset. That's what I was saying.
That's the only reason I didn't make that analogy, too. It's definitely not the scale of war. It's just one of those things that if the analogy works, because either it's really going to suck unless you're really passionate about it. And if you're really passionate about it, it makes a whole lot of sense, and you have to be there. You can make another analogy: joining the Peace Corps. I mean, actually, a really good analogy because it doesn't require war. Who the fuck joins the Peace Corps? People who really care about the suffering of others in third world countries. Like, if you're like, good, thinking about the Peace Corps, maybe like see the world. The Peace Corps is not for seeing the world. The Peace Corps is for being covered in fucking shit and malaria in India so that like little kids can have water to drink. If that doesn't like fucking tickle your fancy, if it doesn't raise the hairs on the back of your head, don't fucking do it. This is going to be the worst thing you've ever done. If you want to do it, you have to do it. Then it'll be the most miraculous thing you've ever done in your life. It's really like that.
Yes.
All right.
Sorry to interrupt.
So, no worries. It's a very, very apt addition here on your part. Hi, Docs. I'm currently in the beginning of week 2 of the new MPT 6-day split. I'm also in a fat loss phase and plan to finish the fat loss phase when my training cycle finishes in 5 weeks. The thing is that I have jiu-jitsu competition that falls the day before my overreaching week begins. To give some background, I'm training for jiu-jitsu just over a year and a half, and this will be my first competition. Just doing it for experience. It's not super important. I'm wondering, would it be best to possibly cut the training cycle short, deload the week before the competition, and try to get rid of some of the fatigue, or just training as usual and jump into the competition? Any help would be greatly appreciated. Love tuning in for these webinars every week. From Ireland, and thanks. Ooh, fucking Ireland, fuck. Hey, why don't you do like Conor McGregor did and just don't train jiu-jitsu and go to the competition? Oh, Habibti. Anyway, that's just being Russian and being a Habib fan. So, listen here, Kevin. I think your idea of listen here.
Made that awfully personal.
Yeah, look at here. Wasn't it
Kevin.
like a Rick and Morty? Look at here, Kevin.
Exactly.
I've taken the calling Jared Feather Jerry when we were training. I'm like, oh, Jerry.
Yeah, sure thing, Jerry.
You're real Julius Caesar, Jerry. You got a real hard bargain. So okay, so listen, Kevin, here, straight talk. I think you have absolutely great idea. I would absolutely agree with it. Deload the week before, really recover that week. You're gonna have a great time. Otherwise, your chance of getting hurt at the competition, your chance of sucking, because remember, one of the highest, sort of most reliable indicators, earliest indicators of fatigue, is a technical breakdown. You do not want that in your just a competition, and your probability of injury is way, way higher. So I would absolutely say to make sure to take that deal beforehand.
Yeah, that's perfect. And the only thing I would add is remember, like your first couple competitions are not, and I know this is a tough pill to swallow, bear with me. It's not about winning. It's about gaining competition experience. And that is a distinct difference. Now, obviously, the whole point of competing is to win. So we can just put that out the window and say, okay, we all agree on that, right? But you want to go in there with the mindset of like, I want to get a feel for what this is like. I want to understand what this is like so that when I do it later, it won't seem as foreign and strange to me, right? So don't fret over the performance. Go in there and have fun and enjoy it and learn, right? And take a deload, be prepared. Don't get crazy and think that you have to like taper and everything has to be fucking perfect for these first couple competitions. And that's just a waste. Or trying to make a really crazy weight class for yourself, something like that. That's just unnecessary. Just show up, have your stuff ready to go, and just have fun. That's it. Boom.
Hi, Docs. I have another question about what to do when you feel like you're spinning your wheels. A little backstory. I started lifting in the gym first at 15, weighing over 90 kilos. I was quite overweight / obese. And in the first couple of years, I lost weight down to 67 to 68 kilos, and I've been fluctuating between 70 and 75 ever since, basically spinning my wheels. I'm constantly dying to try to get under 15%, but when I do get a bit lean, I realize I haven't built a lot / any muscle. I feel the need to mass gain and build some muscle, but then feel scared to become fat like I was when I was younger, similar to adiposophobia. Steve Hall has spoken of previously. I sometimes feel like I've wasted.
that's not a real term. That's just a colloquial term, right?
I wonder, actually. I don't know. That could be a term nowadays.
I didn't want to dismiss it as like a joke if it was real, but it is funny if it is.
For sure. Well, either way, it's definitely a real thing, right?
Yeah. It's basically body dysmorphia for men, right? That's what that is.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, one of the kinds. I sometimes feel like I've wasted a lot of time in the gym and don't have the results to show despite the knowledge of training and nutrition I have. I've been thinking of implementing 12 to 14 week masses with some 6 to 8 week diet in between and not getting slightly leaner. I'm getting slightly leaner each time so I can actually build some muscle but not get too fat at the same time. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And if you have any advice, cheers. Well, Kevin, to be honest, man, you can get leaner anytime you want, but the time to get bigger is in your youth and when you're not injured and so on and so forth. So I think if you're not over 20% fat, I think you should be massing. When you get to 20-ish% fat, in your case, you're not going to look amazing, but you're going to be fucking way stronger and have way more muscle. Then we do like a longer, 10 to 12 week cutting phase, get down to like 15%, and then mass again. And then maybe on your mass phases, as you gain weight over this time, keep topping out at 20%, eventually maybe top out at sort of 18% a couple times and keep that, top out at 18% just once, and then go down to 13% on your cutting phase after. And then after a couple of years, you might be going down to 10% and you'll have something to show for it. So I think that's a pretty good way to go about it. But this whole get down to 10% when, geez, it's an optimal recommendation in all things being equal. It's just not this the only one that works. Anywhere between 10 and 20% packs on muscle real well. I would know because that's how I built the majority of my muscle. Shit, I went to 25. Not that I'm recommending that, but anything up to 20 is totally cool. And, thinking that you're just a fat piece of shit, well, you're not. You're a guy that trains with weights and you're going to be fucking strong. So if you feel like you're, sort of getting so fat that you're not getting optimal muscle gains anymore, yeah, certainly it's time to sort of tone it down and go on a cutting phase. And here's another thing, just on both sides. Everyone, to some extent, at the end of a cutting phase feels like they're too small. And everyone, to some extent, feels like when they're at the end of a massing phase, they're too fat. But if your end of the phases is 2 weeks after you start each one, you're by definition spinning your wheels. So I would say cut down to relevant, 10 to 15% when you cut, and mass to 15 to 20% when you mass. And by doing that, you're going to have, and do it long masses, long cuts, and really change your body each time. Is it okay to feel a little smaller at the end of cuts? Yes, but finish your cut, do that extra month, so you give yourself that much more leanness to jump off of and gain muscle mass. Think of the end of your cut not as, oh man, I'm so small, I should stop cutting and start massing. Think of your end of your cut, ooh, I should go a couple more weeks because I'm starting to get real lean, and this is going to build a real good foundation, a real good jump off point for another multiple months of successful massing.
Yes, that was excellent. And the only thing I would add is, and I say this in a loving, endearing way. Maybe, in fact, you are a fat piece of shit. And what that means is maybe you're just a little heavier, and getting down to 10% might mean like moving fucking mountains for yourself. Does that mean that you're doomed to never put on muscle again? No, it basically just means shift up some of the recommendations that we've used in the past a little bit, like 5%, 10%, a little bit for yourself, until you're able to consistently get down to lower body fat percentages over the long term. So, and that's totally fine. And for all the reasons that Mike already said. So yeah, I mean, you can play devil's advocate and say, yeah, maybe you are a little, maybe huskier on average than some of the people that we talk about, but that's okay. It doesn't mean that you can't be productive and have awesome training. So don't let that psych you out. The numbers are just numbers and guidelines.
Max Jenkins says, salutations, docs. Thanks for answering my question about caloric expenditure of hypertrophy training. Here's my question for this week. I've laid out my logic so you guys can tell me where the hole is in the thinking. From meso to meso, your MEV in terms of number of sets at a predetermined RIR stays around the same number. But your MEV in terms of total volume, sets times reps times weight.
Wait. On average, I think we can.
Yeah, I don't even sort of agree with the first statement, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
Let me read it all out, and then we'll sort of.
Yeah. Sorry.
No worries. But your MEV in terms of total volume, sets number of weight per work per performance actually increases, correct? And this might be true because the mechanisms through which muscle is synthesized are adaptive systems and over time require an increasing greater stimulus to be homeostatically disrupted. Let's say you're going to run 2 consecutive heavy hypertrophy mesos with a deload in between, and you've determined your back MRV to be 10 sets. You would most likely start with both mesos with 10 sets for back, but for the second meso, you would need to either add weight or reps to maintain relative intensity and elicit a similar stimulus for the previous meso's first microcycle. Yes, that is correct. That part is correct. The number of sets is correct. Like one set, one meso to the next, the number of sets could be the same or very similar, but over the years, the number of sets is going to climb in MEV.
Yeah, so like you just got to be careful to consider like some of those, like what Mike is saying is like you might not see a huge change across 2 mesocycles, but what you will see is very large changes across macro cycles.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yep. Would you would most likely start both mesos 10 sets for back, but for the second meso you need yep, correct. Furthermore, if you add weight and or reps but keep the sets the same, you have increased the volume from the previous mesocycles, and theoretically your MEV has increased. Yes, your MEV, well, kind of. So it depends on what rep ranges you end up being. Definitely we expect your MEV to increase somewhat from meso to meso, absolutely. And it doesn't increase by sets because the sets get heavier, right? But your volume might increase because it's sets times reps times weight, absolutely. So your logic is fundamentally sound.
This would also be assuming that the mesocycle was very similar in terms of exercise selection and goal reps, things like that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of averaging here. It would seem to me that not adding weight and or reps to your MEV from meso to meso would be in violation of the overload principle. Correct. Considering that the goal of training in MEV is to train at the very bottom range of the overload threshold, if you start several consecutive mesocycles at the same total volume, it is likely that training is getting relatively easier. RIR is increasing, correct? And thus the stimulus will no longer lie within the overload threshold. So if you find your MEV and you have not discovered the minimum amount of work required to disrupt homeostasis, so if you find your MEV or the MEV that you have, the fuck? If you find your MEV, you have not discovered the minimum amount of work required to disrupt homeostasis because this volume is constantly increasing, but the minimum number of sets of which to spread your starting volume across. Well, real quick, technically, you have found something very, very, very close to it. So your mathematical volume totally, but we're not big fans of calculating mathematical volume on RP because we think the sets proxy works better. And because the RIR is set for given sets, and because the rep range is set, like it's RIR for sets of 8 to 12, by definition, if you're getting stronger, your MEV is going up. That's going to reflect itself in the fact that you use bigger weights, so your mathematical volume is going up as well. So it's absolutely true that your mathematical volume isn't something that we can guarantee stays relatively similar between mesos, but your MEV and set number stays much more similar, although, what James said earlier, it even goes up a little bit between mesos, maybe by half a set per meso or something like that. So after 10 mesos later, it's going to be like a little bit different, quite a bit different.
The thing that you have to consider also is you're looking at a short-term change from a long-term perspective. What I mean by that is that the things that change across 2 mesocycles of training are incredibly small, often immeasurably small. So it is feasible that, yeah, your MEV went up by like a half a set from meso 1 to meso 2, but how do you actually measure or implement that? Well, you can't. So on paper, it's going to look virtually the same. Does that mean it's necessarily wrong? Especially if you're dealing with somebody who's a bit of a, I don't want to say a hard gainer, but somebody who's maybe not a huge responder to training, right? Where they're not PRing constantly, but they're making slow, steady progress over time. Yeah, you're not going to see them jumping from meso to meso, with their MEVs, their MRVs by huge numbers. It might not be something that you can even measure. It might just be the change in intensity or the use of exercise variation or something like that, right? Which generates just enough to continue the overall threshold. So what I think that the flaw in your logic here is that you are assuming very, very large progress, which is good, right? Which is what we all want, within a short amount of time. So I think like I said, you're taking a long-term perspective, which is good, but from meso to meso, that's really short, right? We're talking about 1 month to 2 months instead of 1 year to 2 years. That's where we would expect to see like numerical differences in the volume landmarks. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Like I can, like what I do this year and what I do next year will be different. What I do in this phase and what I do in my next phase are going to be pretty fucking much the same.
Which just goes to show that, you should always be. Remember, James and I introduced like the ghetto MEV estimator of soreness, pump, and effort perception. You should be doing not only formal MEV calculation of trying to figure out when you put things on the back burner, do they stall or do they grow, thus what's your formal MEV mathematically, but you should also always be applying the ghetto formula, the ghetto algorithm, right, of soreness, pump, and effort, or perceived effort, to make sure that you're never sort of assuming that your MEV has gone up where it hasn't, or assuming that it hasn't gone up but it really has. So basically, let's say you assume you're back as MEV of 10 sets per week for like a year. At the end of that year, you realize that every time you start your first micro at 10 before you go to second micro at 12, let's say, your 10 really just doesn't feel like training at all. Well, again, guess what? Your MEV is 12 now. You know what I mean? So, but if you're always aware of that, you can change it on the fly and make sure you do it. Specifically, it comes in handy with things like diet phases, right? So if you're in a fat loss phase, your MEV can all of a sudden jump by 4 sets. Well, if you start at 10 and your MEV is 14, well, you're sort of fucking yourself over by not paying attention to how sore you are, pumped you are, so on and so forth. So keep that in mind. It's always, always, always good to keep updating these values at all times, as opposed to just assuming they're never going to change. You never find your volume landmarks once; you find them every single mesocycle to some extent by some method.
And the Nobel Peace Prize goes to Mike Israetel for the ghetto volume landmarks calculation.
Thank you.
Please, silence. I give to you our latest invention, the RP octopus-mounted ray gun. World's military is just in flames. Nick Shaw cackling at the helm.
Is the ray gun mounted like on its head, or is it like on one of its tentacles?
In the middle of its face.
Okay.
So it looks like an octopus with a dildo on its face. Make fun of it at your peril. All right. Marcia Bly says, "Hi, docs. After listening to Dr. Mike on the last of your Rocky Nutrition podcast, I found myself skipping barefoot through a field of mushrooms. I scraped my foot on a rock, and the fresh wound came into contact with some of the mushrooms. It was at the exact time I had a vision. God damn, this sounds some satanic shit.
What the fuck?
I had a vision that my hypothesis that fasted cardio burned more calories from a stored fat was true. Yep.
Yeah.
Can you please elaborate on the advantages of fasted cardio, especially for advanced individuals looking for optimization? And would it be a good idea to do 1 or 2 sessions of fasted cardio during a masking phase to preserve leanness?" So on a masking phase, it's a giant fucking moot point because, Jesus, like I would just do them out of convenience then. Where fasted cardio might come in handy is the following. You want to make sure that you're burning as much fat as possible, stored fat as opposed to nutrients that are coming into the bloodstream. Because, bloodstream nutrients post-digestion are preferentially used for a variety of shit, and stored fat, not so much. So it's not a huge difference because the calories balance is a real big difference in the end. But you can maximize glycogen synthesis a little bit and maximize fat storage a little bit if you do your cardio fasted. The biggest thing you maximize, though, is time spent not being hungry. So I'm going to give you the following example. If you do your training not fasted, okay, or if you do let's say you wake up, you have breakfast, then you do cardio. Generally, when you're doing cardio, you're working too hard to actually be hungry. There's something to do, there's music to listen to, and you're not miserable sitting around. So we can count cardio as not hunger time. If you eat breakfast and then do cardio, you'll knock your cardio out of the park. It'll be super easy because you'll have so much energy, but also you'll be burning quite a bit of food energy that could have gone to glycogen, it could have gone to recuperation, recovery, which just burned off doing cardio. If you wake up and do cardio first, it's going to be a little bit miserable. You're going to be very tired, but at least you won't be hungry. And then you have that next meal, instead of buying you an hour of cardio time and 2 hours of post-cardio non-hunger time, that meal will be 3 hours of pure non-hunger time plus the 1 hour of cardio that you did. So you get basically 1 hour of cardio fasted gives you an hour of non-hungry time and probably optimizes fat burning, minimally interferes with other stuff. How do you know that's pertinent to you? Well, when you're starving to death, you'll know that's how you're going to sequence your plan. If it doesn't matter and if convenience is number one for you, then I would just go with convenience.
I'm willing to be a little more hostile than Mike on this issue. I think fasted cardio is largely a waste. I've looked into this more than a few times, and the end result is largely the same in that fasted cardio doesn't really gain you any substantial benefits, maybe a marginal amount of more fat burned. What's the trade-off? The potential for more muscle burned at the same time.
That's true.
Pretty shitty. So also, the issue of fasted cardio is an issue of nutrient timing, right? The bigger overriding factor, of course, will be calories, right? And so, as Mike already said, a lot of that gets washed out just by either having a calorie deficit or not. So if you think that you can do like a weird combo of intermittent fasting with fasted cardio in a eucaloric state to somehow burn fat, you are mostly going to be spinning your wheels, homie. I got bad news for you. So I would say for people who are serious about sport and or physique, the trade-offs of fasted cardio don't seem to be worth the effort. And if you just like to do fasted cardio and it just tickles your fancy, that's fine. That's totally cool. And if it's the difference between you doing the cardio and not doing the cardio at all, right? Like if you're saying like, I can only do it first thing in the morning, I got to get up and just do it. Otherwise it won't get done. Fine. I submit. You do it. Just do it at that point. But if you're under the impression that it's somehow netting you some weird benefit that non-fasted cardio does not, you are misinformed at that point. So I'm not a fan. I think it's not great. But for the reasons that Mike already said, it can be implemented and can be useful at some times.
And he says, thanks as always, guys, and congrats again to Dr. Mike. Saw the costume-themed wedding party on Instagram, and it looked wild AF. Wow, it sure was.
As fuck.
All right, Orcish King, Ida the Ghoul, says, what's up, docs? How are you living? Hope my hiatus didn't go unnoticed. I was busy destroying insubordinate villages in the orc realm, which got me to think.
Yeah, it's important to note that orcs don't fuck around within their own community, right? First of all, it's not that they're wanting to pillage the elves, the humans, the dwarves, hobbits, whatever. First, they could keeping shit in order at home. Don't you fucking give me any back talk. We're coming. Big Brother's coming for you.
That's right. All right. Number one, although not the goal, how would strength gains when hypertrophy training differ between training at MEV versus going to MEV to MRV? Does MEV training leave more capacity for adaptations? One of them being strength, whereas less accumulative fatigue that allows for more strength to be expressed during training. Both. So I would say that on average, here's the answer I would like. Training close to your MEV for strength is going to give you about the same amount of strength as training between your MEV and MRV for hypertrophy. The latter gets you a shitload more size, but they both get you about the same strength. Mostly because the preparedness is really shot to shit with the movement from MEV to MRV. So it's really kind of like you're just showing off more. Once you're training at MEV for hypertrophy, you might as well just shift your intensities up so that you can get even more strong and really strong. This was evidenced really well in the replication of the Radielli study by Schoenfeld and colleagues. Recently, the 45-set study, they showed that you gain just about as much strength training 15 sets a week as you do 45 sets a week, basically sort of MEV-ish versus MRV-ish. And it's really crazy because people thought, how the fuck is this possible? Well, the 45 sets, you could imagine, accumulated a little bit more fatigue than converted fiber types, a little more in the slow twitch direction, so on and forth, degraded technique a little bit more. So, basically, if you want to get really strong, you train with lower end volumes. If you want to get really big, you train with higher end volumes, and just know what you want before you get into it.
Brilliant. Yeah, so kind of the quick summary on that is preparedness in the short term is higher. So training at MEV or close to it is better for strength. However, in the long term, gaining more muscle potentiates more strength gains. So training to MRV is maybe preferable in a long-term sense in training.
For volume, for sure, yeah. I will say one thing that really, really super pertinent here, and this is, I was going to make an analogy to something James and I are working on, but I need to shut the fuck up and not mention that. James,
Wait,
talking about.
shut the fuck up.
Fuck off. So if you think about how does one track if they're making progress in hypertrophy, you have to understand that not an option is to track microcycle to microcycle strength improvements. Okay, a lot of people will say, "Hey, listen, I trained in this way in this program, and I got really great strength results. So I think it's the best way to put on size. The rep ranges were 10 to 15, blah blah blah, and it was really low volume." So how do you know you got stronger? Well, every microcycle I could add more weight to the bar than with this other method. Well, now, hold on a second. We know that muscle size isn't added at the rapidity that would reflect itself in week-to-week strength increases, first of all. Second of all, what do we really know for increasing strength week to week? That our fatigue is not rising remotely quickly. Right? We know that. So then we have a real problem here. Here's an example. If you do 5 sets of 10 per week, you might be in the capacity to add 5 kilos to each lift every week. If you do an average of 10 sets of 10, you might only be able to add 2.5 kilos to the bar every week or something like that. So you think, oh man, the low volume stuff's really getting me jacked and the other stuff's not good. But because you've not hit your MRV with either, and you've done way more volume with the 10 by 10, you're actually, after dropping fatigue at the end of the microcycle, mesocycle, you're going to have gained way more muscle on 10 by 10. I thought, but I was getting strong with a 5 by 10. Well, the point of a hypertrophy cycle is not to get strong within that cycle. It is to train up to the point where you can no longer recover over the mesocycle, not get stronger over the mesocycle. You figure out strength increases after the mesocycle, right? So in essence, a really good takeaway from this understanding that strength benefits from lower volumes than hypertrophy is don't in between microcycles track your strength to mean that if it's going up fast, you're gaining size, because you could just easily be confounding it with an increase in preparedness. And the way to do that is, shit, you guys want the most effective size building program? Just deload every other week. Oh my God, you'd be so fucking strong, right? Every other week you'll be hitting massive PRs because you're fucking not fatigued at all. You do that for 8 weeks and the shit won't peter off and you'll never gain size again until you do a concentrated loading phase, because it turns out you were just fucking around with your preparedness. So be very, very careful about that. And don't worry too much about how your strength goes between microcycles. And not trying definitely shouldn't go down, but it shouldn't be going up all the time, because if it's going up, it means you're not accumulating enough volume, thus enough fatigue to maximize hypertrophy.
Very good, 100%.
A real good at strength training cycle, actually, or a very good, sorry, not strength, hypertrophy training cycle, is one in which your strength doesn't change the entire mesocycle, and after you deload, your strength goes up because you accumulated just as much fatigue as you did adaptation, which means you're accumulating a lot of fucking fatigue, which means you're actually fucking working, right? If your preparedness goes up, right? Remember, preparedness is the ability to actually lift. If it's going down, you know you're hitting it hard, right? It goes down almost all the time when you're hitting good training cycles in the accumulation phase. When does preparedness actually go up? When you're tapering. Can you imagine if you increase your preparedness during a mesocycle? You're fucking tapering. You're
Doing
joking
backwards.
yourself. You're not. Yeah, you're really just not training enough. Number two, there's still the notion that one can train closer to MEV and make a bit slower gains, but still reach the same amount of gains in the long term. This might be true in theory, but in practice, what does your experience say about those that err on the side of less? Do they tend to plateau earlier / more often on average and not reach the same level? Well, I think if you train at MEV for a really long time, then you're sort of ticking the clock on how much longer you're going to be productively training. Most people gain the majority of their size in their 20s and some of it in their 30s. If you train at MEV, you might be able to sort of theoretically get your biggest in your 60s, but nobody's making size anymore because hormonally that's not an option anymore. Eating that much food is not an option anymore. Your health might not support it an option anymore. So while the going is good, get your optimal gains. Your later years can be for getting as lean as you possibly can because leanness is still very much possible. In fact, optimal, seemingly. When you're very old, you get old man lean. You do not get old man big. So the idea of always training in your MEV, to be technical, I guess you did say closer to MEV. Yeah, there is some trade-off there, but if you take that too far, you're just never going to amount to the same size because the size train for other reasons like hormonal, time, accumulated injuries will run you out of town. Here's another thing. Training constantly at MEV probably means that you're going to have more neural adaptations and display more neural strength qualities, which means your actual weights that you use in training will be relatively heavy in relation to how big your muscles actually are. That's actually sort of a recipe for just as much injury as training with higher volumes. Because basically when folks train closer to their MEV, they almost always train heavier because that raises their, because their preparedness is usually higher, they can go heavier and still be able to put weight on the bar. So I'm not even so sure that training very, very close to MEV for a long time, decades, is going to keep you much safer. It certainly will keep you a little safer, but I think it's just very difficult to refute the idea that you get optimal gains. Here's another thing too, and this is a really important point. In some cases, it's absolutely true that training close to MEV will make gains. It's not a bit slower, it's quite a bit slower. You still reach the same amount of gains in the long term. Let me ask you a question. Are you trying to get big so that at age 45, you reach your biggest point for 1 month, you walk around on the beach, you take pictures, and then you retire? No. You hypothetically want to get big, sort of not as soon as you can, but at a brisk pace. Let's say you're a competitive bodybuilder. How long has Dexter Jackson been at roughly his biggest? 18 fucking years? And he's been winning shows that whole time. Can you imagine taking your sweet fucking time and doing shitty at shows? You're not even a pro yet. Finally, you turn pro at Masters 40 plus, and then, you do a couple shows and then you have to retire because you're too fucking old and you can't push your body like that anymore. Someone could say, well, he still got to the same size. Getting to the same size isn't quite the same thing as getting there faster. Let me give you a really stupid fucking analogy that is actually technically analogical. It works. If we have 2 tank factories and we're going to war, one tank factory produces a tank that takes 6 months to produce, and one tank produces the same tank in 3 months. Okay, same quality. Which factory has the advantage? Well, of course, the 3-month tank. Why? Because their tanks go to war earlier and fight for longer, right? Like a tank 3 months later after the Battle of the Bulge is fucking useless because if we lost that, we'd lose fucking World War II. You know what I mean? Or depending on where you're from, what country, you probably like that. I'm just kidding. Ida Dagul, oh fuck, man, you're Israeli. Really not appreciate losing World War II. So that's the thing, right? If people talk about it like, well, we still get to the same place. Well, here's another way to about it, and I'll give it off to James after this. You could say that running a marathon at half speed will still get you to the finish line, but by then everyone left already. Who gives a shit?
Yeah. One thing I would add too is Mike was taking kind of the what's it called, the steel man steel man approach on that, right? I'm going to go ahead and straw man it, right? So
Excellent.
one thing with the MEV, like just training either at or basically at your MEV, one of the examples you can look at is like hit training, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm going to basically hit the minimal threshold of growth by either ramping up the relative intensity of what I'm doing and essentially training to failure at all times. Now you actually are not getting the best world that Mike already described, where you're saying, okay, well, your preparedness is high, you're using relatively heavy weight, which is kind of cool. But now you're actually saying my preparedness is abysmally low and my risk of injury is exponentially higher. So I'm still getting my MEV by doing one or two sets to failure, and that's cool. But now the trade-offs are pretty shitty, especially when we consider that volume is probably the biggest driver of growth. I think that argument tends to fall apart pretty quickly when you split the difference. You say, okay, well, don't use HIIT as an example. Okay, fine. Well, don't use like powerlifting as an example either. There's probably somewhere in between. But then it's like, okay, well, if you're not doing HIIT and you're not doing powerlifting, then what kind of fucking training are you doing at that point? It doesn't even make sense based on a principled approach. Like, what are you trying to do? Trying to get bigger. Okay, well, what are the biggest factors driving muscle growth? Well, volume. So why try to take a minimalist approach? This is true in the scientific literature, and it's true in experience, anecdote, and in the professional world, right? Like there is something to the kind of like the previous joke that we were talking about earlier, like who's the last guy in the weight room? Well, sometimes that actually does work, right? Guys who put in more work sometimes might be bigger, and there is some merit to that. And in this case, like putting in more work actually gets you the results that you want. So I would be careful with some of that stuff, because I actually studied under somebody who was a minimalist person, and I'm glad I did, because it definitely gave me a perspective. But then you realize like volume, even sorry, I'm rambling. I apologize, but it's volume tends to be this big confounder across all sporting activities. Like, you want to be a really good endurance athlete, even like a high intensity endurance athlete, well, you got to put in volume. You want to be a really good rugby player, well, at some point you got to have the work capacity and muscle size to become strong and powerful and do HIIT style running, right? Well, how do you get that? Well, volume, right? Like, it's one of those things, like it just kind of becomes this all-encompassing thing, and trying to minimize the time spent in the gym tends to get you minimum results. It's just one of those things that we see in the science, we see it in practice. It's hard to get around. I'm not a big fan.
Yeah, that's a real good point, JMO. There's this sort of thing about, like, when the MRV concept first came out, probably due to me butchering how I presented it, there was a sort of assumption that we were just saying, you've got to train as hard as you possibly can at all times and run to the finish line, sprint, trip over yourself, get injured, and fuck up. There's actually a Lyle McDonald podcast where he's interviewed by some German dude who is like, oh, MRV is pretty stupid, huh? And he's like, yeah, we're just trying to get hurt. And because Lyle's fucking retarded, has no idea what he's talking about. And he didn't realize that MRV wasn't.
It's like a definitional error too, right? So it's like, if you're getting hurt, then you are exceeding your MRV, right? That's the by definition.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much, either acutely or chronically. So basically, it's one of those things where the real juxtaposition is folks who take super care to do very little and sort of dope out the growth slowly, versus folks like maybe James and I would like to caricature ourselves being in the middle, where we have a sort of a view of all the approaches, and we say, you know what, there's probably a way to get a real good trade-off of lowish injury, but also some pretty aggressive growth, because people got places to be, right? The minimalist thing is like, well, hey, by definition, here's what the minimalist thing is. It's like, you want your worst growth ever, but still technically grow? Yeah, well, you love minimalist training. Like, all right, like, if your goal is to get in the gym and just be in shape and have a hobby and sort of still make gains just so you can tell yourself you're not a total piece of shit, fine. But you might want to be interested in something closer to optimum and get into that range of trade-offs. And injury is a part of that range. It just has to be.
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
Number 3, a big pet peeve of mine is people talking in wishy-washy terms. I think it indicates not having a deep understanding of the concepts. Has the need to use zingers and sayings that sound good but don't hold water. Plus, I think it confuses the shit out of people. One of them being, you should fight to keep your strength when cutting. Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
We hear in the know that is not very accurate and that volume is king, but it got me thinking about what the term fighting is. and the way many people view training and making gains as something you have to fight to get or win over. Our ability, well, the funny thing is, the way I see them saying that is you have to alter other training variables in order to conserve the ability to exhibit your strength. And then you realize some of those other training variables, like volume, are more determinative of muscle size than strength. So that's where you get the problem there.
win.
Yeah, sorry, what did I win? You're getting weaker. Okay, sweet. Did I lose muscle? Yep, tons. You just made neural adaptations to counteract that.
You'll get weaker later.
Yeah, that's right. You won't get muscle back in 2 weeks. It'll take 8 months. I like that. You win like Street Fighter style. You win.
You win.
Every time I think about that, for some reason Dawson is the only character that comes up who's the most fucking ridiculous.
You're gonna meet him soon.
Yeah, pretty much. I assume Dawson will be at the airport in Mumbai. We here in the know that it's not very accurate. Volume is king, but it got me thinking about the term fighting and the way many people view training and making gains as something you have to fight over to win over. Our ability to express fitness is mostly predetermined when we step into the gym, isn't it? Sheer focus and grit can get you an extra rep or two, but it isn't what would make or break your progress. Yeah, totally. With that said,
short term, yeah.
With that said, what are some of your biggest pet peeves in fitness today, and more specifically in the evidence-based niche? I always thank you for your input. I got an easy. We'll just do one each. I got an easy one, and then James can think of his. Taking a recent study and feeling like you have to talk about it ad nauseum. It's something I hate doing myself because it sometimes just gets riled up. So like the 45-set Schoenfeld study, I had to make a post about it just so people stopped doing it. I said in the post, this is stupid. It's one study. Why are we talking about it? Everyone always asks, like, hey, did you hear that one study? No, I didn't fucking hear about the one study. Fuck you. Translation, of course I fucking heard about it, and I put it in its context as the fact that it's one fucking study. Let me tell you motherfuckers something real quick. They just did a study published on female trainees where somewhere between 5 and 10 sets per week was found to be the peak of the dose response curve for hypertrophy and strength. They went 5, 10, 15, and 20 sets per week for 24 weeks straight. So you take the Schoenfeld 45-set study, and you take the recent female study where 5 to 10 was peaked. And let's make fun of Lyle some more. Lyle literally broke up with 3 of his many years friends, James Krieger, Brad Schoenfeld, and Eric Helms. He literally just broke it off with those 3 guys over that one fucking 45-set study. And I didn't hear a fucking peep from his dumb ass about the 5 to 10 set study. That's aberrant too. We don't have any precedent to say 5 to 10 is the best range. We have a lot of precedent saying 10 to 20 is the best range. Right? You didn't hear any request for methods, any riling. Why not? Because it just confirmed his biases. But whether or not a study confirms your bias, it's almost hilarious that this female study came out like 2 months after the Schoenfeld study. People ask me, what do you think of the Schoenfeld study? I said it's a relatively aberrant result. But I wouldn't take it super to heart. I think it shows that in short terms you can train with a lot of volume and survive. I wouldn't do this in the long term, and I would follow your own volume landmarks. Most people's are somewhere in the 10 to 25 range for MRV. This fucking 5 to 10 study comes out, and it's the other way aberrant. Well, that's how fucking research works. It's all averages. Like you look at 40 studies at a time like James Krieger does, you don't fucking look at one. They asked James Krieger what he thought of his own fucking 45-set study. He's like, yeah, sure, is curious. I don't know how much it expands on anything, but maybe we can survive more volume than we thought we could. Maybe fucking not. So it drives me, as you can tell, it's a real big pet peeve. Hey, Doc, what do you think of the recent study? I don't fucking think of the recent study. I think of the last 10 years of research. Then you let me know what that looks like, because it starts to look like a bell curve. And because it looks like a bell curve, we fucking shoot the middle, and that's where the fucking recommendations are. Fuck up on it.
You know what's funny too, Mike, is the 5 to 10 set study actually confirms the literature on dose response. People just don't realize it. They've looked at beginners plenty of times, right? They say like, okay, take somebody's relatively new, or even just by definition trained, which is usually
they were like 3 years of training, but not impressively trained. Yeah,
right. Not impressively trained. That means they did like a couple CrossFit classes and some yoga, right? What do we find? Well, we find the optimal dose response is actually relatively low. It actually confirms what we already know based on training age.
Here's another really big factor. It's a 24-week study. To my knowledge, they didn't deload at all during the study. James, that's 24 weeks of straight training. The 15 to 20 volume groups just probably died in their sleep or something like that. Like, of course you can't say that's per mesocycle, right? When you and I say like MRV is 20 to 25, we also say MAV is 10-ish. That means if you and I had to pick an optimal dose, just give me the set numbers, it's going to make optimal hypertrophy. Be like, in what context? We'd be like, just give it to us. assuming that there's deloading is happening when needed, we'd say 15, right? Like 15,
Yes.
you know? So, but that is sort of, already with if you say, okay, if someone asked me, okay, we got these fucking trained subjects, we're going to go 24 weeks with no deloading. Is it 5, 10, 15, or 20 that's going to get the best results? I'm like, well, 20 is dead for sure. 15, I don't think is going to survive. I think it's 5 or 10.
Let's go with
right?
5.
Like, yeah, I'd probably just choose 5 just to be safe. Like I'm sure if I had to train someone for 24 weeks straight, I would just choose 5 because I'd be like, at least you're not going to die. And you might
Exactly.
It's a stupid fucking way to train. It's unbelievably insane. But already we're making a mistake. James and I are making a mistake because we're speculating as to why the results occurred. Of the reason we could think that those 24 weeks, there are 500 reasons we can't, and we don't know. We don't know the specific study. It could come out in 3 months that this entire study was fabricated, and the researchers are going to jail. Who the fuck are we to tell that? It's aggregate studies, aggregate. Look at the comprehensive review of literature, not the study of the time. James, you got any pet peeves to mention?
Well, I share your pain on that particular pet peeve. Other pet peeves, honestly, Mike, what really gets under my skin is the reoccurring fads. And I'll give it a very specific example. And I don't mean this to be the example by itself. I mean it as a recurring fad. The low carb approach for athletes.
Yeah.
Why or like keto for athletes, right? Why does this keep coming back? Well, it's been like we've been in the 1960s and 70s explored that like giving soccer players more carbohydrate comparatively increase their performance, or at least the amount of work that they could do on the soccer field. And we've been only reconfirming that to greater extent and greater degrees and greater specificity over the last several decades, right? So it's been one of those things where it's like we've known this since fucking like Woodstock era, and it just for whatever reason things just keep waxing and waning with the times. And it's really all about, it's a sales pitch thing, right? Where people are saying like, come do this. I saw you posted the other day, or maybe it was yesterday. The snake diet guy was like, I'll cure your fucking AIDS. It's like, are you kidding me? Right? Like this is ridiculous.
Keto fasting diet.
It's one of those things, and I'm just saying, I'm not trying to pick any one particular thing like keto or anything, but things that kind of come and go, right? Like stability training, low carb dieting, using bands and chains. Like they go, like they resurge, they go away, they resurge like 5 to 10 years later. That really starts to get to me. And I understand that like it's frustrating for people like us who have been around for a while, and those of you on RP Plus, like you have probably been studying the field for maybe 5 to 10 years. So you have already had enough time to formulate an opinion. So now you get the next generation of 18 to 20-year-olds who are now looking into fitness, and they're trying to say, oh, what are these cool things that I want to look into? Oh, let's explore low carb. Let's explore all these things. And then it resurges.
Which is why education is why it's so important. You got to get a good education so you can learn from everyone else's mistakes, folks.
Right. And that's the thing that doesn't happen in fitness. And that's what pisses me off, right? We've been making this mistake for decades, and it just keeps coming back, and nobody is willing. And I feel like sometimes I don't want to like be a dickhead, but I feel like sometimes people aren't, and kind of getting back to the wishy-washy language, like you mentioned, like some people are afraid to take a strong position stance, right? One example, and I don't mean to, this is not a call out, but I've said this before, laying on Joe Rogan, where I was waiting. I was like, yes, here's the guy who's going to put the nail in the fucking coffin on this issue. Didn't do it. He was wishy-washy the whole time. He was selling his agenda, which was primarily based on adherence strategies and da-da-da-da-da. And it was so disappointing, right? And it was like, you were just being fucking wishy-washy. If it was me, I would have went on there. And I'm not saying that it should have been me and I would have done better and this and that. That's not what I'm trying to say. I want somebody to be bold on these things so we can put it to rest, put the nail in the fucking coffin, be like, low carb for athletes is stupid. Be done with it. Be done with it. I want it to be over. I don't want to explore this on RP Plus 5 years from now when somebody else who hasn't, hopefully RP Plus is still going, right? We got a new subscriber and like, hey, what do you think about, keto for rugby? And I'm going to be like, son of a bitch, haven't you watched these 5 years of webinars at this point? Right? That's what gets me. And that's just a product of people who are new and enthusiastic, yet we have it, and also people who are being wishy-washy, as you said, not putting the nail in the coffin. So that gets to me.
Thomas Sowell was quoted. I'm going to be paraphrasing. I think he was talking about this in the context of the trickle-down theory of economics, where he said, people who sort of think of this don't realize they're not even among the first million people to have thought of this.
Right.
It's so
Yes.
funny when people are like, "What do you think, Dr. Mike? What do you think about keto?" Like, what is a discovery to you is not remotely a discovery to the world of 50 years. It's almost embarrassing. Like, it's like being a diehard pacifist when you're an adult. Like, when you're a kid, fine. When you're an adult, you grow up, you study about Chamberlain and Churchill and Hitler, and you're just not a pacifist anymore. So what do you think about pacifism? Well, I can tell you don't read books because of what you think about pacifism. And the thing is, in the fitness industry, it's not just pacifism as an esoteric concept. It does not have to apply to you personally. You waste your own money on this goddamn bullshit, like buying fucking keto supplements. Like, well, I can tell why you're fucking out of the loop.
Pacifism's great when everyone else is pacifist.
Right? Lesson number one.
but
But as soon as they're not, you're done. Yeah. All right. Martin Kumaru says, "Hello, docs. I asked a couple of weeks ago about greasing the groove. You did not know what it was and made various masturbation jokes and ruined that phrase for me forever." Excellent.
I remember that.
All right. Greasing the groove is the act of doing a low amount of reps and many sets with plenty of rest and an exercise to increase the total amount of reps you can do. It is most often used for pull-ups. For example, you hang a pull-up bar in the doorway leading to your kitchen. Every time you go to the kitchen, you do easy reps. So if you can do 4 reps, you do 1 rep. If you can do 10 reps, you do 3 reps. It's used to get a lot of volume and training doing the exercise without getting a lot of fatigue, because you always stay far away from failure. And since most people don't enter their kitchen every 5 minutes, surprised. You get a lot of rest between every set of easy reps. I've started doing this at work. Every time I pass a certain point, I do 2 pull-ups. I can do about 7 to 8. During annual work day, it becomes around 10 to 15 pull-ups. My question was if I could do this every day, my work, including days I train back, or should I only do it on the days I'm not training back? I think it's a pretty bad way to train, probably one of the worst. What you're getting is a lot of junk volume, not very stimulatory volume.
Yeah.
And if the volume adds up to a lot, that's great. If you can recover that frequently, that's great. I would absolutely reduce that volume the day before a back day and the day of a back day, and then maybe get back to it if you really insist on doing it after the back day so you can recover and have a good back workout. But honestly, I just wouldn't do shit like this and save my pull-ups for when I'm actually training.
Yeah, there's more and more compelling research that suggests that proximity to failure, even maintaining a range of proximity to failure, seems to be important, not only for strength, but for muscle growth as well. And it might be one of those things where, like, if you're training at like 6 reps shy of failure all the time, the trade-off in fatigue to fitness gained is probably shitty. And I think that's what Mike was kind of alluding to. So it's one of those things in one sense, like, yeah, you're getting in the volume, right? But you're doing it in a way that's less stimulative, but the fatigue generated is still ultimately the same as if you accumulate all these reps, right? So I'm not a fan of that. I'm not. And I think there's also, this is maybe getting into some nitty gritty stuff, but I think there's metabolite considerations too, which you might not be benefiting from virtually at all doing that style of training versus having a session of like, okay, I'm going to do, 5 by 10 pull downs, or, whatever you can do that you're not getting when you do 2 or 3 pull-ups at a time. Do you agree with that at all, Mike, or do you think that's inconsequential?
No, I think I think that if you sum up the volume from all those pull-ups, you're going to have an effect, and it might be even a decent effect. The question is then one of efficiency. It's a very inefficient way to train.
Yeah.
You can fucking not ruin your workday by doing pull-ups all the goddamn time, focus at work, and then come and have awesome training, get a good pump, get a good effect, and you maximize your, you could do all kinds of, mechanics have big forearms because they work on wrenches and stuff all the time. But if there are more efficient ways to have bigger forearms, fuck yeah. Like, I have fucking big forearms in most mechanics, and what do? I train forearms like, 8 work sets per week. Like, it's a total of 20 minutes. So definitely, I don't think it's worth it. But if you really want to do it, adjust to your workout.
Yeah, I think that's great in the beginning when you're getting enthused about fitness, but then once you start training, right? Once you start training, then it's like, okay, maybe you want to switch that out.
For sure. Furthermore, I visit my girlfriend in England every weekend. But due to budget constraints, I have to spend Saturday night at the airport so I can get an early plane home. As a result, I get very poor sleep, 2 to 3 on the airport floor and 2 hours on the plane. Usually wake up every 30 to 45 minutes. However, I am home around Sunday noon, therefore could potentially train that day. Should I spend the day relaxing completely, or should I train that day but maybe do something like half my usual volume because of my bad sleep? I don't know if it matters your answer, but currently I do an upper-lower split Monday, Thursday, and I do some working sets of pull-ups at work Friday since I don't have time to train that day. If you don't have time to train that day, then the working sets of pull-ups are a really good idea. What I would recommend is actually taking that Sunday, training when you get back, but training lighter, higher reps, plenty of sets, but not heavier because it's too injurious and because you won't perform very well. So on the lighter end, sets of 20 or so, supersets, shit like that, stuff to get a pump. Go home, eat a bunch of food, go to sleep early, and get a shitload of sleep. Your training effect of sleep is an effect that is probably more magnified if you don't sleep after training than if you don't sleep before. If you don't sleep before training, you get enough caffeine in you, you'll have training that goes just fine for the most part. If you don't sleep after training, you're literally molecularly not activating the recovery adaptive mechanisms like you should be. There's nothing to save you then. So if you said, I have to have a bad night of sleep, is it going to be before training or after training? If I was a power lifter, maybe I'd say before because lifting heavy is what it's all about. If I was a bodybuilder or a physique athlete, maybe like yourself, I would absolutely train. I would have the bad night of sleep before the training. Train tired, go home, really relax. Cheers.
Yes, absolutely. And I think just to confirm what Mike said, I think when you know you're going to get shitty sleep, and actually I had this happen to me when I was out in Philly for Mike's wedding recently. Can you get the volume of work in when you have suboptimal conditions, especially sleep? Yes. Can you get high intensity workouts when you have shitty sleep? No. It's generally a shittier trade-off. So I think Mike's suggestion about doing like the higher rep stuff, maybe like the metabolite stuff, it's a really, really good compromise. And so I think kind of the take-home message there is like, don't plan on having your most intense workout days where you're like, okay, I need to get, 245 by 8 or my workout's fucked, right? Like don't have those kind of workouts. Have the easier ones where it's like, okay, I just need to get like 6 sets of some chest in here one way or another. That's all I need. Those are the types of workouts you want to do. Don't have like an intensity based or intensity minimums that you're trying to hit.
Yeah.
I had the shittiest bench workout, I swear to God. And I think I still blame it's that Anytime has like the shittiest bench setup ever. It was a combination of being traveled, right, and like maybe not the greatest setup, but I had like one of those dog shit workouts after I got there, right, where I was just like minimum reps, like just like unnecessarily high RIR. Then I came home, I lifted right after I got off the plane from Los Angeles. We drove home from Los Angeles, went home, rested for a minute, said hi to Piccolo, took a pump up drink, worked out, had a great workout after that. So you never know. It's hard to gauge sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Also, during the strength phase, when would one know when they are overreached? Would it be the same with hypertrophy, where you feel tired and stagnate / miss reps? I've been increasing my sets weekly, but I still feel fine. It depends on your performance. Remember, if you can no longer perform at your usual level, then you're in some capacity overreached, whether it's overreached due to too much work or too little recovery. One way or another you are. So it's in a strength phase. It's actually really easy to see.
It's real
because
obvious.
It's really super dependent on, like you'll just get like 2 reps where you're supposed to get 5. And you're like, no, that shit's not happening.
Exactly. I was going to say it's more obvious on a strength phase than a hypertrophy phase. On a hypertrophy phase, you're going to be looking at lifestyle and other factors like that, where it's like, oh, wow, this is actually starting to affect other things like my mood and my work performance, right? And for strength, like you'll know right away when you get, like Mike said, instead of 5 reps, you get 2 reps. So that's like, boom, instant feedback.
Yep. All right. Hunter Pavelski. I forget how to say these last names in English. Kowalski, man. Hello, doctors. I'm pretty new to RP Plus, and I've been binge listening to the webinars the last few weeks. To quote the Frosted Flakes Tiger, they're great.
Glad you like.
He's a fucking total drug using hypocrite. That guy, by the way.
He is. I like the Family Guy, where it's like their food.
Their food, technically not food. I'm 19 and I've been training around 5 years now. The first 4 years I trained like a bro with my dad. I competed in a bodybuilding competition 2 years ago at 6 foot, 162 pound stage weight, and have been bulking too slowly since Now at 200 pounds, I plan to bulk hard to 205 plus, then do a maintenance phase and then a mini cut to around 185, 190. All right.
Sounds reasonable.
My first question is for the mini cut. I'm eating, James and Joey, I'm eating
Jesus.
pretty high carbs, 500 to 600 on training days, 6 days a week, and under 70 grams of fat per day. Would it be better to cut carbs way down and keep the fats about the same to improve insulin sensitivity, or drop fats to 0.3 grams per body weight and keep 0.3 grams per pound of body weight and keep carbs a bit higher? Normally, I don't normally feel good on fats and do better with carbs. So it's not the insulin sensitivity thing we're going for there. It's going to be a moot point. That's mostly calories. I think 70 grams of carb or fats is right around 0.3 for you. It's real close. So yeah, I would get to 0.3 or something, which could be for you like 60, since you're 200 fucking pounds. Yeah, you're going to have to cut mostly carbs.
Yeah, I don't think the goal of trying to stimulate insulin sensitivity is worth your effort. It's a moot point.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally great. That's part of the first part of the mini cut, but that's going to come from the calorie deficit and the weight loss and the fat loss, not really the carb ratios. Number two, can you both give your opinion on glucose disposal agents, GDAs? Also, would it be a good idea to take GDA to finish off a bulk, say for the last 4 weeks, or just a waste of money? So glucose disposal agents, of which the most famous is metformin, is a drug. It's not a supplement, so talk to your doctor about it. Metformin is a very good drug if you don't have any adverse side effects, and it actually is a longevity drug. It's great for everything, and you should probably take it the rest of your life. If you heard it here, you didn't hear it here. They're great for everything. Say finish off bulk, finish off cut, all that stuff's awesome. But it's a very serious substance, so make sure you don't take it without supervision of a medical doctor.
I don't have an opinion because I'm ignorant on the topic. So
you should be thankful for that. Number three, high bar squatting for taller guys. I used to only squat to parallel on flat shoes and never really got sore after squatting. But after seeing Dr. Mike squat, I got a pair of raised heel shoes and aired my stance, and I'm going deep full range of motion. I get super sore after most quad days. Haha. And after about a year, I can now squat more weight than ever. That's awesome. I'm concerned about my knees, though. I get a very small bit of knee pain after some squat workouts. In my current phase, doing barbell once a week and Smith machine once a week. I do wear knee sleeves most of the time for barbell. That's not going to do shit for knee pain, by the way.
I was going to say, get those sleeves out of here.
Yeah, and my last overreaching leg day did 225 for 10, 250 for 10 by 4, at 3, 2, 2, 1 RAR. I know it's hard for you to know without seeing my form, but do you think I should be worried or it's not a big deal? Also, why doesn't Mike wear knee sleeves ever? Because they don't do anything unless you're already fucked up. Thank you both. Please keep going and doing the Q&As. You bet we will. I would say that your technique has to be assessed. Your small knee pain can turn into big knee pain after a while, so I would definitely pay attention to it. If it hurts during squatting but not during other exercises, I would do only other exercises for a while. Come back to squatting slowly. Try sitting on your heels more. Open at your hips more, so push your butt back a little bit before you break at the knees. That could help relieve a lot of knee pain. Work on your stance, work on a lot of stuff. Your technique is going to be the big deciding factor here. But basically, no, the knee pain is not normal, so don't keep doing what you're doing.
It also depends on what you were considering pain, right? So when Mike and I think of pain, we think of something that's like sharp or preventing us from doing activities of daily living, right? Like something that's noticeably bad where you go, ooh.
Yeah, ooh,
right?
ooh, that's not supposed to be there, yeah.
That's not right. If you're getting like soreness, stiffness, or a little bit of joint discomfort, like after, the next day, those are largely okay. Especially if they're not preventing you from doing anything, right? If you're just like, ooh, my knees are a little like, meh, maybe not feeling their best today, but it's like you can walk upstairs, you can go to class, you can run around, do whatever you're doing normally.
If it's a specific part of your knee, if you can point to where your knee hurts, it's bad. Stop.
Exactly, right. If it's just discomfort, tightness, stiffness, stuff like that, you can shrug that off mostly. And I wouldn't sweat it too much. But I mean, so one thing to consider, right? So like there's been a lot of, from when Mike and I were undergrads, the idea of full range of motion squatting was largely debatable. Now it's not. Why not? Well, because they've done a bunch of research on it. And what they have found was, yes, doing full range of motion actually does put quite a bit of stress on your knees for the squat. But it's that stress in the long term that actually makes that joint stronger and prevents a lot of injuries, right? Whereas doing the partial range of motion usually results in increased intensity and unfortunate biomechanics at the point of like peak torque, which usually perpetuates knee injuries. So one thing to keep in mind is that, yeah, you are acutely doing damage to those connective tissues in that knee, which is making your knee stronger in the long term.
All right, Alessandro Zucchi.
I like that name too.
Hey, Docs, it's good to see you again. Good to see you too, so to speak, Alessandro.
Hey, Zucchini.
What? Mike, I watched your most recent podcast with Steve Hall. Did you change your view on variation between mesocycles? Yes, I did. After 6 weeks accumulation phase, would you now recommend selecting new exercises for that accessory movements while keeping the same fundamentals, or should I pick a new variation of the compounds as well? I would say that it depends on training age, but most folks can go 2 to 3 mesocycles without changing a whole much of anything. In synthesis, should I focus on getting stronger for reps and build momentum over the months on the lifts that I found to work best for me, or should I change exercise to provide a stimulus? You should do the first one first and the second one secondly.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you change exercises to provide a new stimulus when the old ones get stale and you're no longer getting a whole lot stronger on them, and especially if they're sort of feel really fatiguey and weird and you just kind of don't want to do them, then I would change. But until the getting is good, I would get it. James?
No, that's it. Yeah. You change them when you're not making progress anymore, when you start plateauing.
Yep. Number
Hopefully
two.
maybe slightly before then.
Sure. Number 2, sometimes I struggle to set up my own program in a way that allows for best recovery between sessions. I know there is no such thing as a perfect split, but I would appreciate it if you guys gave me your thoughts and tips on how I should design a 6-day-per-week hypertrophy program.
Sure.
So I would start with a push, legs, pull template. So 6 days per week, 1 day's push, all muscles that push, all muscles that pull, or push, all muscles of your lower body, and then pull. So upper body push, upper body, or lower body, and then upper body pull. You take those days, you add, so 2 and 2, right? So you do push, legs, pull, rest, repeat. On the pushing days, you add some bicep and rear side delt work because those muscles tend to recover quickly and they need more frequent stimulation than just twice a week. And then there you have it. And I would start at minimum effective volumes and not raise your volumes in such a way that interferes with one thing or the other. And then I think you're good to go.
That's what I would do.
And there's some just real quick exercise selection. Like if you have a muscle, like a leg training, like if you do deadlifts on your leg training, but it really fucks up your bent over rows the next day, take your bent rows and put them to the next, after the next leg session so that you're maybe back's not so tired and you can get more out of it. Number 3, pseudo-psychological question. We'll give you a pseudo-psychological answer. Mike and James, I think it's correct to say that you both are very busy people. You travel the world and are constantly invited to numerous events. Well, let me say something real quick. Some of us travel the world to where we're needed. We're needed. Where the RP octopus reaches and says, yay, and we shall give these people light. And some of us are no more than profit hungry. What are those called? Mercs. You're a fucking merc, JMO. You ain't nothing. You would never.
So Mike's salty that I turned down a couple seminars lately.
Anyway, we're just like a married couple at this point.
Well, considering how many we do together, I mean, like my record's pretty good.
I know. I'm totally joking. I shouldn't be going to half these places. All right.
No, I feel your pain because like there are some like that Mike's doing that I respectfully declined to do because I didn't want to do it. He's got to foot the effort himself now, and that sucks. So,
well, I got a whole band of troublemakers with me, so no big deal on that. All right, you travel the world and are constantly invited to numerous events to share your knowledge and experience. What do you do when you can't stick to your meal or training program for various reasons? I currently run an office job that gives me the certainty to train every day with consistency, but in the future I may have to travel a lot more for work. Of course, a part of me is excited at the idea of traveling, meeting new people, and having a stimulating job, but a part of me also fears lack of security and certainty of a well-consolidated daily routine and the impossibility to stick to my plan. I love bodybuilding as everyone here, and I want to keep doing it for as long as I possibly can, but I don't want it to become a limitation for the other aspects of my life. Have you ever felt this way? How do you overcome this? You do some really neat trick that I learned, and James can extrapolate on this. You take the universe of things that are optimal, and you put it over here at one end of the spectrum. And you take the universe of things that are possible given your limitations on travel, and you put it over here. And then when you find shit from this universe that's at the closest possible end it could be, in the practical, but closest to optimal, You do that shit on the road. That's it. So, for example, you're traveling, so you can't eat your bodybuilding diet, but is there a grocery store? Yes, then get something as close to it as possible. You got a microwave Airbnb, which means you can get cut up, pre-cooked grilled chicken. You can get one of them rice packets you don't even have to cook. You just put in the microwave. You can get a couple pieces of fruit and a thing of veggies and some mineral water, and you got a fucking great damn near bodybuilding meal right there. Do you have an Anytime Fitness pass like James Hoffman and Melissa Davis do? Can you train it out basically anywhere around the world? Yes, well, then you're fucking good to go. You're golden. Are you going to bring your powerlifting belt with you to travel? No, but can you bring a neoprene belt that gives you most of the same support and still gives you good workouts and stuff it in your bag? Totally. So what you have to do is forget about the optimal in the sense of it's realistic for you because it's no longer. But you got to look at everything that's possible and try to engineer it to be as close as optimal as you can. And then the last trick is to be okay with this. Because if you were going to do everything optimally, you would just get some kind of weird job where you run drugs and you would just do that and you just bodybuild full time. Yeah, I don't know. You would prostitute yourself and then you just bodybuild. James is like, what? That's what he does for a living. That's why he's acting awkward. How preposterous.
I just thought about somebody going to HR. Like, I haven't gotten my drugs for this month.
Like, well, sorry, you can't be a bodybuilder. So basically, it's the accepting of the fact that, hey, you're doing your best, and that's totally awesome. So when James and I travel on the road, there's never a time when we are at a gym, we look at each other and, God damn it, we don't have our fucking weightlifting shoes. Fuck, there's no chalk. Fuck, this is bullshit. I'm just going to leave the gym, and I don't even need to be a bodybuilder. We never say that. We're like, okay, we don't have our weightlifting shoes, but there's a pretty cool leg press right over there. There's a Smith machine squat right over there. We're going to do 6 sets of leg presses, high reps, because we don't have our shoes and we don't have chalk to grab the handles. It's the high reps are going to fuck us up, and then we're going to go over there and do high reps. After pre-exhausting the Smith machine, we're going to hobble out, having a great workout. We're going to eat as much clean food as we can. With whatever food we're presented, we'll choose the cleanest of that food, so to speak, the highest protein, highest carbs, lowest fats, and then we'll get as much good sleep as we can given the conditions, and we'll try to create the conditions we can, and that's it. Just do your best.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Totally spot on. I'm again willing to be slightly more hostile than Mike.
Yes, I live for this shit.
Mike's answer was correct, but I'm willing to go just a little further and say there are very few times on the road where you really can't do what you want to do. I've been to the Arctic Circle twice, and was able to stay on with the training and nutrition that I chose to do, right? So that's not like a dick wagging thing, but it's just to illustrate a point that, like, if you are resourceful, if you take it seriously enough, you can make it happen. It's not a lot of people just say like, oh, I'm traveling, so I don't have any fucking choice. That's bullshit. We travel all over the goddamn place. If you can Google search something, you can figure out what are restaurants in the area that I'm staying in. Can I get an Airbnb instead of a hotel so I have kitchen that I can cook food in, right? Are there gyms? Like, is there an Anytime? Like Mike mentioned, Anytime. I love the Anytime thing. I've used that all over the United States. I've used it all over the world. There's a gym that I can always go to. And guess what? If I'm in Australia and I wake up at 3 a.m, I can go fucking train at 3 a.m. because I got my Anytime.
We've done that.
Done it. It's one of those things like if there's a will, there's a way. And the travel thing, I'm finding, and I'm at the risk of sounding a bit salty here, I'm finding it to be less and less and less of an excuse. So when people say, oh, I'm going to Austin this weekend, I won't be able to train or follow the diet, I'm like, fuck you. What are you talking about? You can absolutely do it. That's just bullshit. And I don't mean it's bullshit in terms of like, is it going to be slightly more difficult than normal? Yeah, but you're just willing to throw in the towel and say, I can't. That just means you don't want to. There's plenty of opportunities. We did it in Finland. We were in the Arctic fucking Circle. I'm not exaggerating. We found a gym in buttfuck Santaville, Finland, and had an awesome training session. Didn't have our weightlifting shoes. Didn't have our, whey and Gatorade. Made it work, right? Find what you have, resources available. You can do a little research ahead of time and say, you know what? I know there's a grocery store. I know there's a Servo. I know there's a fucking, what's the one in the UK? Tesco's and the Sainsbury's. Right. Like you can find that shit out ahead of time. You can Google search what gyms, when are they open? Are they open on Sundays? Are they open on Monday? Can I do a drop-in fee? Mel and Mike as well. I know that both of them have done this. They will email jujitsu places. Mel emailed one in Thailand and they were like, oh yeah, come on down to Nogi Ka and we'll do it. Right. Like it takes a little bit of effort. Right. And that's where people are. That's just kind of where they fall out. And I don't mean to sound like a hard ass, like fucking be disciplined and hard work and blood and sweat. But yeah, there's a little bit of that in it where it's like all you can
Mix your blood and sweat together.
yeah, and it's like you just got to put a little bit of effort into it, and then you find that it's actually almost exactly the same. Now, that being said, I will say there are a few places where we did struggle, and I can name a couple off the top of my head. Thailand was one where the nutrition scene there is tough. Like if somebody's like, James, I'm going to Thailand for a week, I'm going to be like, you know what? Good luck. Let's just switch to maintenance because there's nothing but fried noodles and meat on a stick out there. Fair enough. Right. And then Bavaria, when we were in like southern Germany and Austria.
Worse than Thailand.
It was tough. Everything was just super fatty fried meats. That was it. The protein bar scene was very limited. Protein shakes were limited. It was.
Well, we went to the only fucking GNC in fucking Austria.
We found it.
Bought
Yeah.
a shitload of protein bars, and they weren't exorbitantly priced, and it was great.
We bought like the whole store. It was really funny. I still have that T-shirt, by the way. So I guess long story short, summary. Travel can be difficult, but it's not as difficult as you may seem. You just got to put a little foresight and a little effort into it, and you can make it work almost identical.
Yep. Yeah, very, very good. All right, number 4, last one. This will be super anticlimactic. What is your opinion about SARMs? Tried watching Broderick podcast here, his opinion on the matter, but without success. Thank you, always. SARMs are, there's a couple of effective ones, but they're very, very hard to get because almost all SARMs are fake. I know that's crazy. So until that changes, and as of 2017 at least, it was almost all fakes. Until that changes, SARMs are just not a good idea to buy because you're probably getting ripped off, first of all. Second of all, just, God damn it, I don't even know if SARMs are legal in the US anymore. Maybe some are, some aren't. For those of you in the UK for who drugs are illegal to purchase and use, just for God's sake, just take Anavar. Stop taking SARMs. You don't get the shit half the time. They also cause some bad side effects too. And the SARMs are not the golden fleece we expected them to be. So,
as most things don't turn out to be.
For sure.
By the way, Broderick
JMO,
was
chat
at his
is
wedding.
malfunctioning.
Yes,
Somebody
somebody messaged me while you were talking, so I already emailed the IT guys while we
Sweet.
were.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll get that resolved.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting us know. I understand it's not working.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I guess that's it.
Yeah, that's it. So here's the deal, guys. I'm gonna try and work on getting the chat fixed for next time. Mike will be in India, so it's very likely that I will be covering next week's webinar, and then depending on if Mike is available after that, we'll double check. But so plan on just me next time, and we'll still do it at the normal.
Very ominous.
Yeah, no, sorry, that's not what I was going for.
I'm just kidding.
I just
Mike
meant that
probably not going to make it back.
I just meant that he's going to be away and traveling, and sometimes there's like a transition when you come back where maybe you're just not available to do certain things, and that's fine.
Yep.
So plan on me only. So if you want to have anything specific for me or just general questions as normal, that's totally fine. And then hopefully Mike will be back the subsequent week after that. Do you know if do you know if you're around, or you're not even thinking that far ahead? Just want to make it through.
Oh, totally around. Yeah, totally around. I should be around this next week too, but I'm almost certainly going to be around the week after that. So.
Okay, very cool. I will continue to work on getting the chats stuff done. So in the meantime, until the chat is fixed, just submit your questions to the forum for now. And if I notice, seems like we have a lot more new subscribers lately. So if you're relatively new, there is a forum. If you log into your RP Plus account, go to the forum, go to miscellaneous, and then there's a thread that's like webinar questions for Mike and James. That's where you post them, and then that's where I tally them each week and repost them on the webinar. So put your questions in there for now until we get the live stream fixed.
Yeah. Cool. All right, folks.
All right. This
Peace
is
and love. See you in India.
signing out. That's right. Good luck. See you guys next week.